Good afternoon and welcome to this unexpected Mary Trump Show live stream of the surprise January 6th Select Committee hearing. We just learned about this yesterday. So quick note, because of this, we will not have our regular 7 o'clock show tonight. But once again, I will have an amazing panel joining me, coming in and out, giving live commentary and analysis during the break. And of course, after the hearing is finished. There was a lot of speculation going around yesterday because the committee wasn't saying much of anything. We knew that the hearing was going to happen based on new information that had been brought to their attention. We knew that they were going to be calling a witness. We didn't know what the information was about. We didn't know who the witness was. But I think it was safe to assume they would not be doing this in the middle of a break, the July 4th recess, if it weren't really important. As far as I understand it, most of the committee members were already back in their home districts. So I think it's fair to assume that this is big. There was tons of speculation about who the witness might be. And obviously I didn't see everybody's guesses. I didn't make one myself because it's just pure speculation. I just wanted it to be somebody who had damning information, didn't really care who it was. And it turns out that it's somebody that I don't think anybody expected, and somebody certainly who's not a household name. She is somebody who gave a videotaped deposition. But I believe she was the in her deposition, I believe she is the woman who told the committee or revealed to the committee that people like Taylor Greene and other Congress people were asking for preemptive pardons. Her name is Cassidy Hutchinson, and I don't want to get this wrong. I should know this, but I think it there's been so much going on. It's been driven from my head. She was an aide to Mark Meadows, or at least worked in his office. So somebody clearly who would have been in the room during crucial conversations, and somebody whose testimony is absolutely worth hearing. I will say that it's really dangerous to it would be very dangerous for the committee not to come through because they have ramped up expectations so much with this. They've done everything so impeccably so far that it's hard for me to believe that they don't have the goods. And I'm also curious if there are going to be other witnesses called. Hello, Brian, Jen. Hi, it's great to see you.
Hey.
It hasn't been near what we thought it would be because we know this is happening.
Is it already past the 4th of July?
I keep thinking it's March, so who knows? March of like 2019. So I want to put this to you. I was just discussing the level of expectation and anticipation that's been set up by the committee, because on the one hand, you have to think there's no way they would be doing this if it weren't huge. On the other hand, you worry if it isn't huge, that will damage them. So I'm very nervous.
Well, as we all are.
Yeah. The question is why they're doing it. It might be an emergency, not because they're trying to like do some sort of shock and awe thing, but as folks have discussed, because there's a real danger, one, that this witness could change their mind, or two, that the Department of Justice could shut this down.
I think there's also there were hints and allegations of a threat against the witness. I don't know what the Department of Justice can or will shut down, but I think it's interesting, Jen, that, the day before the Thursday one, we had we had Jeff Clark pulled out in his PJs and tossed on his front lawn. And then, yes, which a visual, I hope someone got a picture of that. But
wait, but Brian, we do have video that he released of them taking his phone out of his little belt phone holder.
And we got John Eastman, who got his phone records pulled. So I'm interested to see, because there's now no doubt that there is a grand jury. There is no doubt that Merrick Garland is pursuing this. And there seems to be little doubt among those who know, as particularly former prosecutors, that both of those people are staring at charges when this is all said and done. So that's the nexus that I think we have to view today's testimony through is what is it exactly that she's bringing to the table, and why now?
Yeah, because she testified already. I mean, she was deposed already.
She wasn't live. I mean,
right.
I haven't followed all the news today, so this might be stuff that people are talking about, but it strikes me that she will be someone helping to provide context for the documentary film, because these things seem to go together.
Oh, interesting.
Be interesting to see, because she was the personal. I mean, she was the silent person in the room taking notes all the time with Meadows and the president. So the former president. So what she has to say today, and I think it's getting started, isn't it? Soon.
1 o'clock from what?
Oh yeah. So I
mean,
think
we're on it. So
yeah. So I think that when we're
just going to talk and not listen to the hearing. We'll read about it on Twitter later. I'm kidding, guys. We are going to.
I have this biography of William Howard Taft to discuss.
Oh boy!
Maybe we could do that. I think your listeners would like that. That'd be interesting. I mean, I haven't started reading it, so that might not be as interesting yet. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm going to talk about how I planned to read for the 500th time In Search of Lost Time by Priest. Anyway,
I was going to read 1984. It seems like a biography of the American.
We're living it. Yeah. No need to read it. So I think that is something as you both know, there was wild speculation going on yesterday about who the witness was before we figured out who it actually was.
That's all anybody would talk about in DC.
Yeah, right? But I have to say, I came down on, I don't care who it is. It's probably somebody we've never heard of. I just care what they have to say. And honestly, out of all the people, she's not a hostile witness. We know this. And like you guys just said, she was in the room. There is the chief of staff is like the second most powerful person.
Yes.
Right.
In the White House.
Yeah. Well, the chief of staff is, remember your West Wing. That's the guy who actually runs the West Wing. And that's pretty true. I mean, that's the chief of staff is the president's right-hand man, the one that he counts on, or she counts on, if we actually ever had a female president, that would run the office for the president, making sure that what the president wants done is done. And even Donald Trump is excellent at making sure that people do what he wants done.
Well,
right.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
No, just really quickly, even if the person in the Oval Office is actually competent and actually knows what he's doing, the chief of staff is still incredibly important and is still running Jen, they control access, right?
Well, they control access, and they control what they actually do is, I'm sorry, because I've been there. I was just, they take and they run.
I didn't. Did you change your name to Jen?
I'm sorry.
He's actually knowledgeable, but yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
What they do is they will, all right, they'll set the agenda for the day. So the press secretary, this is what we're working on. They'll have early morning meetings every day where they work with the staff and they say, all right, here's what we're putting in play today. Here's what you have to do today. Here's what I want done today. And then they facilitate the flow of information and the workload throughout the White House. That's basically what they do on any given day. Sorry, I did interrupt, and I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add, and I know you know this, but she was the one at the last hearing who we saw on the videos naming the members of Congress who had sought a pardon. So,
yeah, that's interesting. Pardon?
So,
what'd you say? Pardon? No. I meant, what'd you say?
Remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene, didn't really deny that she sought a pardon. She just said this person doesn't know. I would expect that we're going to get some questions about those pardons from her.
That would
And
be
whether there was any quid pro quo. I mean, there, remember, she's this person who at one time had a administration friendly lawyer and then broke out and got her own lawyers, right?
It was actually a lawyer Donald was paying for, from what I understand.
Paying for.
And I you would know, yes, the RNC was paying for it or reimburse, whatever. But Jen, you would know this. They're not going to show a videotape deposition of somebody making those claims unless there's proof, right?
Well, I mean, it's, what do you mean by proof? I mean, her
like contemporaneous notes.
No, I mean, no, she wouldn't need, I mean, your own eyewitness testimony.
Oh, right. Otherwise she'd be committing perjury.
And if they trust her,
sorry,
you need to trust her. But at the same time, she may have notes.
Right. And I forgot that most people think perjury is a serious crime and won't commit it unless you want to be in the Supreme Court and you're a Republican. And then perjury is totally cool.
Oh, hey now.
Well, I mean,
I like that you went there.
Well, I know technically they didn't commit perjury, but they came as close as you can come.
You know what, guys? I need to have a private moment of prayer. Would you join me? No, I'm kidding.
Only if we're praying to a Christian God.
Yes, and we have to do it in a public school.
Wait a second, Jen. Did you get your husband's permission to be here today? I didn't get the signed release form.
Oops.
You see, we're gonna have to get used to this second-class citizenship.
Yeah, he's busy shutting down all of my bank accounts and things like that.
Ouch.
Taking everything out of your name. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Well, we're there. I mean, that was like literally the first episode of the Handmaid's
Tale. Well, now
Tale.
they want to take up making a sodomy illegal again, so that's going to ruin a lot of people's Saturday nights. So hey.
They're turning a nation into scofflaws. People are going to be spending their, the minute you have a lot of people in the country planning ways to defy an unjust law, there's going to be a lot of not complying with just laws. I mean, it creates complete chaos.
Well, doesn't overturning established legal precedents?
Mary, I'm getting all these text messages saying, "What are people watching?" Or maybe it's not on yet, right?
No. Is it?
Well, maybe she might be going into the room and sitting there. Can we get the feed at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we could get the feed, there we go. Yeah, they're not. The guys behind the scenes are totally
early, Mary.
You know what?
Early.
I'm curious about this because I remember before the first hearing, I was incredibly nervous. I think we all were really nervous. I'm feeling the same way today with this difference. Today, I'm nervous in a good way. I'm really excited.
I will point out to you that of those people that you're looking at now, many of those photographers, they usually cover the White House. For them to be over there today indicates that we've been told that there's going to be something of significance in the hearing. Otherwise, they would not be there.
That is an awesome
I love that
piece
kid.
of information.
Who's that kid? You're like,
I don't know. He looks very comfortable there.
I don't know. This is Mary, I'm not nervous in that way. Have they overplayed their hand or have they?
No. I'm excited. Like it's a good nervous.
I just haven't slept enough to feel anything other than tingly.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the word I should have used. The first hearing, I was anxious.
Yes.
And now it's like nervous excitement. And I cannot, I don't know. This committee has done such a brilliant job. I find it almost impossible to believe that they would fall short today.
I almost thought about getting on a train and getting in line today. And then I thought, no, I mean, I'm sure these seats, the press seats are probably already spoken for. Or is it what do you think, Brian? If I'd gotten there early enough, do you think I could have been in the room?
I applied to get in the room today. And I think what's going to happen on occasions like this, it's going to be the majors will get their first shot. And then if someone doesn't show up, you might get in. But it's, and they do try to rotate them. I'll say that Congress is far better at this than the White House at making sure that a lot of people get into these events. But today is a very special occasion. I'm looking at the feed. And like I said, I noticed these are White House photographers. I noticed some of the reporters. These people are here because there's the Washington Post, there's the New York Times, there's AP, there's Reuters. These are people that usually cover the president of the United States. And I mean, individually. So they came over from the White House today instead of being in the White House. Of course, he's out of town, but it tells you that at the very least, we've been tipped off that there's going to be something of significance in the testimony. And we spent, like I said, most people in town yesterday spent the entire day trying to figure out what the hell that was and who was going to be there. And once we figured out who was going to be there, now we're just trying to figure out whether or not the threats against her life are credible. And that's why they did this today.
Waj, are you anxious or nervous or excited?
I mean, how can you not be nervous just surviving 2022 America as we have radical extremists wearing black robes? But
I meant specifically about the hearing.
Hey now.
Yeah, we can talk about the other stuff later because it is a nightmare.
I'm not nervous in the sense that I think each hearing brings about more clarity to what we knew and assumed, is that this was a widespread orchestrated effort, not just limited to Donald Trump and a few cronies, but the entire right-wing ecosystem. And each hearing, which we've just discussed before on your show, on your podcast, really well done, and lays the narrative about how in-depth and intricate this plan was. And I think today, just based on some things that we know, Cassidy Hutchinson
there
is going to lay some bombshells. There she is. There she walks in. I mean, she was with Mark Meadows all the time. She is an intimate witness to history, to a coup. So I think the fact that she's here, she's going to sing. And this is not going to be a good day for Mark. And
no, it's not good. And she's going to open up with an aria.
This is also speculation, but I'm guessing, I think Jen said this earlier, that they could be doing this not because it's, a total blowing everything out of the water, but because she's probably having so much pressure put on her.
Yeah.
From Donald's side of things, that I think that she's here. That gives her incentive to talk even more openly and honestly. And here we go.
For her protection.
That's right. Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during this hearing. Good afternoon. In our hearings over the previous weeks, the Select Committee has laid out the details of a multi-part pressure campaign driven by the former president aimed at overturning the results of the 2020 presidential election and blocking the transfer of power. We've shown that this effort was based on a lie that the election was stolen, tainted by widespread fraud, Donald Trump's big lie. In the weeks ahead, the committee will hold additional hearings about how Donald Trump summoned a mob of his supporters to Washington, spurred them to march on the Capitol, and failed to take meaningful action to quell the violence as it was unfolding on January 6th. However, in recent days, the Select Committee has obtained new information dealing with what was going on in the White House on January 6th and in the days prior. Specific detailed information about what the former president and his top aides were doing and saying in those critical hours. Firsthand details of what transpired in the office of the White House Chief of Staff, just steps from the Oval Office as the threats of violence became clear, and indeed, violence ultimately descended on the Capitol in the attack on American democracy. It's important that the American people hear that information immediately. That's why, in consultation with the Vice Chair, I've recalled the committee for today's hearing. As you've seen and heard in our earlier hearings, the Select Committee has developed a massive body of evidence thanks to the many hundreds of witnesses who have voluntarily provided information relevant to our investigation. It hasn't always been easy to get that information because the same people who drove the former president's pressure campaign to overturn the election are now trying to cover up the truth about January 6th. But thanks to the courage of certain individuals, the truth won't be buried. The American people won't be left in the dark. Our witness today, Ms. Cassie Hutchinson, has embodied that courage.
She looks very
I
scared.
won't get into a lot of detail about Ms. Hutchinson's testimony. Will show. I'll allow her words to speak for themselves. And I hope everyone at home will listen very closely. First, I'll recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening statements she'd care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In our first 5 hearings, the committee has heard from a significant number of Republicans, including former Trump administration Justice Department officials, Trump campaign officials, several members of President Trump's White House staff, a prominent conservative judge, and several others. Today's witness, Ms. Cassidy Hutchinson, is another Republican and another former member of President Trump's White House staff. Certain of us in the House of Representatives recall that Ms. Hutchinson once worked for House Republican Whip Steve Scalise, but she is also a familiar face on Capitol Hill because she held a prominent role in the White House Legislative Affairs Office and later was the principal aide to President Trump's Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. Ms. Hutchinson has spent considerable time up here on Capitol Hill representing the Trump administration, and we welcome her back. Up until now, our hearings have each been organized to address specific elements of President Trump's plan to overturn the 2020 election. Today, we are departing somewhat from that model because Ms. Hutchinson's testimony touches on several important and cross-cutting topics that are relevant to each of our future hearings. In her role working for the White House Chief of Staff, Ms. Hutchinson handled a vast number of sensitive issues. She worked in the West Wing, several steps down the hall from the Oval Office. Ms. Hutchinson spoke daily with members of Congress, with high-ranking officials in the administration, with senior White House staff, including Mr. Meadows, with White House counsel, lawyers, and with Mr. Tony Ornato, who served as the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. She also worked on a daily basis with members of the Secret Service who were posted in the White House. In short, Ms. Hutchinson was in a position to know a great deal about the happenings in the Trump White House.
She was all over that.
Ms.
White
Hutchinson
House.
has
She was
already
there every
sat
day.
for videotaped
I saw her
interviews
multiple
with committee
times
investigators,
a
and we
day.
thank her very much for her cooperation and for her courage. We will cover certain, but not all relevant topics within Ms. Hutchinson's knowledge today.
Hi, Allie. Hi,
Again,
Adam.
our future hearings will supply greater detail, putting the testimony today in a broader and more complete context. Today, you will hear Ms. Hutchinson relate certain firsthand observations of President Trump's conduct on January 6th. You will also hear new information regarding the actions and statements of Mr. Trump's senior advisors that day, including his Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, and his White House counsel.
Oh,
And we will begin to examine evidence bearing on what President Trump and members of the White House staff knew about the prospect for violence on January 6th, even before that violence began. To best communicate the information the committee has gathered, we will follow the practice of our recent hearings, playing videotape testimony from Ms. Hutchinson and others, and also posing questions to Ms. Hutchinson live. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Our witness today is Ms. Cassie Hutchinson, who served in the Trump administration in the White House Office of Legislative Affairs from 2019 to 2020, and as a special assistant to the president in the White House Chief of Staff's office from March 2020 through January 2021. I will now swear in our witness. The witness will please stand and raise her right hand.
Who's
Buckle up.
questioning her?
I
You
can't
swear
wait to find out.
affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. Thank you. You may be seated.
Oh, I hope it's
Let the
raspy.
record reflect the
I
witness
hope it's
answered in
Jimmy.
the affirmative. I now recognize myself for questions. Ms. Hutchinson, I'd like to start with a few questions about your background. These are some photographs we've obtained highlighting your career. These show you with members of Congress, including Steve Scalise, as well as the White House with leader Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan. Others show you with the president and members of Congress aboard Air Force One. Before you worked in the White House, you worked on Capitol Hill for Representative Steve Scalise, the Republican whip, and Senator Ted Cruz. And then in 2019, you moved to the White House and served there until the end of the Trump administration in 2020. When you started at the White House, you served in the Office of Legislative Affairs. We understand that you were initially hired as a staff assistant, but were soon promoted to a position of greater responsibility. Can you explain your role for the committee?
When I moved over to the White House Chief of Staff's office with Mr. Meadows when he became the 4th Chief of Staff, it's difficult to describe a typical day. I was a special assistant to the president and an advisor to the Chief of Staff. The days depended on what the president was doing that day, and that's kind of how my portfolio was reflected. I had a lot of outreach with members of Congress, senior cabinet officials. I would work on policy issues with relevant internal components and members on the Hill, as well as security protocol at the White House complex for Mr. Meadows and the president.
And then you received another promotion in March 2020. At that time, you became the principal aide to the new White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
What did a typical day look like for you in your work with Mr. Meadows?
It varied with what was going on. We spent a lot of time on the Hill. I spent time on the Hill independently too, as I was his liaison for Capitol Hill.
Okay. Simon. Well, I guess we'll have to talk about your book about Rutherford B. Hayes or whoever, Jen. And I can talk about In Search of Lost Time.
Can you just pull up the Select Committee's site itself?
I have to assume they're trying everything, but
I've got it on my.
He's been locked out. He's refreshing.
Staff's office suite is the heart of the West Wing.
Well, this is
was your desk.
Oh, all right.
Which
can you leave that on?
The Vice President's office, Ms. Kirshner's
Can I
office.
share?
That's perfect for now, Jen, the audio.
Was your desk.
Oh.
Which was between the Vice President's office, Ms. Kirshner's office, and the Oval Office. Ms. Hudson, is this an accurate depiction of where you were located?
It's accurate. It's a lot smaller than it looks.
Absolutely. Ms. Hudson, this is a photo that shows the short distance between your office and the president's Oval Office. And it only takes 5 to 10 seconds or so to walk down the hall from your office to the Oval Office. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you. Pursuant to the Section 5C8 of House Resolution 503, the chair recognizes gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we will begin today with an exchange that first provided Ms. Hutchinson a tangible sense of the ongoing planning for the events of January 6th. On January 2nd, 4 days before the attack on our Capitol, President Trump's lead lawyer, Mr. Giuliani, was meeting with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and others. Ms. Hutchinson, do you remember Mr. Giuliani meeting with Mr. Meadows on January 2nd, 2021?
I do. He met with Mr. Meadows in the evening of January 2nd, 2021.
And we understand that you walked Mr. Giuliani out of the White House that night, and he talked to you about January 6th. What do you remember him saying?
As Mr. Giuliani and I were walking to his vehicles that evening, he looked at me and said something to the effect of, "Cass, are you excited for the 6th? It's going to be a great day." I remember looking at him and saying, "Rudy, could you explain what's happening on the 6th?" He had responded something to the effect of, "We're going to the Capitol. It's going to be great. The president's going to be there. He's going to look powerful. He's going to be with the members. He's going to be with the senators. Talk to the chief about it. Talk to the chief about it. He knows about it."
And did you go back then up to the West Wing and tell Mr. Meadows about your conversation with Mr. Giuliani?
I did. After Mr. Giuliani had left the campus that evening, I went back up to our office and I found Mr. Meadows in his office on the couch. He was scrolling through his phone. I remember leaning against the doorway and saying, "I had an interesting conversation with Rudy, Mark. Sounds like we're going to go to the Capitol." He didn't look up from his phone and said something to the effect of, "There's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real bad on January 6th.
Whoa.
Ms. Hutchinson, Mr. Meadows is engaged in litigation with the committee to try to avoid testifying.
Lawyer up.
What was your reaction when he said to you things might get real bad?
In the days before January 2nd, I was apprehensive about the 6th. I had heard general plans for a rally. I had heard tentative movements to potentially go to the Capitol. But
They had
from hearing
discussed them in
Rudy's
the
take
press
on
office,
January 6th
actually.
and then Mark's response, that evening was the first moment that I remember feeling scared and nervous for what could happen on January 6th. And I had a deeper concern for what was happening with the planning aspects of it.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Today, we're going to be focusing primarily on the events of January 5th and 6th at the White House. But to begin and to frame the discussion, I want to talk about a conversation that you had with Mr. John Ratcliffe, the Director of National Intelligence. And you had this conversation in December of 2020. Mr. Ratcliffe was nominated by President Trump to oversee U.S. intelligence, our U.S. intelligence community. And before his appointment, Mr. Ratcliffe was a Republican member of Congress. As you will see on this clip, Director Ratcliffe's comments in December of 2020 were prescient.
Love that word.
My understanding was Director Ratcliffe didn't want much to do with the post-election period. Director Ratcliffe felt that it wasn't something that the White House should be pursuing. It felt it was dangerous for the president's legacy. He had expressed to me that he was concerned that it could spiral out of control and potentially be dangerous, either for our democracy or the way that things were going for the 6th.
When you say it wasn't something the White House should be pursuing, what's the it?
Trying to fight the results of the election, finding missing ballots, pressuring filing lawsuits in certain states where there didn't seem to be significant evidence, and reaching out to state legislatures about
Ouch.
that. So pretty much the way that the White House is handling the post-election period, he felt that there could be dangerous repercussions in terms of precedent set for elections, for our democracy, for the 6th. He was hoping that we would concede.
So, Ms. Hutchinson, now we're going to turn to certain information that was available before January 4th and what the Trump administration and the president knew about the potential for violence before January 6th.
This woman's running for president
On the
in the
screen,
future.
you will
She
see
has
an
to.
email received by Acting Deputy Attorney General Donahue on January 4th from the National Security Division of the Department of Justice. Mr. Donahue testified in our hearings last week. The email identifies apparent planning by those coming to Washington on January 6th to, quote, occupy federal buildings and discussions of, quote, invading the Capitol building. Here's what Mr. Donahue said to us.
And we knew that if you have tens of thousands of very upset people showing up in Washington, D.C., that there was potential for violence.
The U.S. Secret Service was looking at similar information and watching the planned demonstrations. In fact, their intelligence division sent several emails to White House personnel like Deputy Chief of Staff Tony Ornato and the head of the President's Protective Detail, Robert Engel, including certain materials listing events like those on the screen. The White House continued to receive updates about planned demonstrations, including information regarding the Proud Boys organizing and planning to attend events on January 6th. Although Ms. Hutchinson has no detailed knowledge of any planning involving the Proud Boys for January 6th, she did note this.
I recall hearing the word Oath Keeper and hearing the word Proud Boys closer to the planning of the January 6th rally when Mr. Giuliani would be around.
Woof.
On January 3rd, the Capitol Police issued a special event assessment. In that document, the Capitol Police noted that the Proud Boys and other groups planned to be in Washington, D.C. on January 6th and indicated that, quote, unlike previous post-election protests, the targets of the pro-Trump supporters are not necessarily the counter-protesters as they were previously, but rather Congress itself is the target on the 6th.
Well, there's a
Stand
line.
back and stand by.
Whoa.
That's a bomb.
Of course, we all know now that the Proud Boys showed up on January 6th, marched from the Washington Monument to the Capitol that day, and led the riotous mob to invade and occupy our Capitol. Ms. Hutchinson, I want to play you a clip of one of our meetings when you described a call on January 4th that you received from National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien on the same topic, potential violence on January 6th.
I received a call from Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor. He had asked if he could speak with Mr. Meadows about potential words of violence that he was hearing that were potentially going to happen on the Hill on January 6th. I had asked if he had connected with Tony Ornato because Tony Ornato had a conversation with him, with Mark about that topic. Robert had said, I'll talk to Tony, and then I don't know if Robert ever connected with Mark about the issue.
Ms. Hutchinson, can you describe for us Mr. Ornato's responsibilities as Deputy Chief of Staff?
The Deputy Chief of Staff position at the White House for operations is arguably one of the most important positions that somebody can hold. They're in charge of all security protocol for the campus and all presidential protectees, primarily the president and the first family, but anything that requires security for any individual that has presidential protection, so the Chief of Staff or the National Security Advisor, as well as the Vice President's team too. Tony would oversee all of that, and he was the conduit for security protocol between White House staff and the United States Secret Service.
Thank you. And you also described a brief meeting between Mr. Ornato and Mr. Meadows on the potential for violence. The meeting was on January 4th. They were talking about the potential for violence on January 6th. Let's listen to a clip of that testimony.
Remember, Mr. Ornato had talked to him about intelligence reports. I remember Mr. Ornato coming in and saying that we had intel reports saying that there could potentially be violence on the 6th.
You also told us about reports of violence and weapons that the Secret Service were receiving on the night of January 5th and throughout the day on January 6th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There are reports that police in Washington, D.C. had arrested several people with firearms or ammunition following a separate pro-Trump rally in Freedom Plaza on the evening of January 5th. Are those some of the reports that you recall hearing about?
They are.
Of course, the world now knows that the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th had many different types of weapons. When a president speaks, the Secret Service typically requires those attending to pass through metal detectors, known as magnetometers, or MAGs for short. The Select Committee has learned that people who willingly entered the enclosed area for President Trump's speech were screened so they could attend the rally at the Ellipse. They had weapons and other items that were confiscated: pepper spray, knives, brass knuckles, tasers, body armor, gas masks, batons, blunt weapons. And those were just from the people who chose to go through the security for the president's event on the Ellipse, not the several thousand members of the crowd who refused to go through the MAGs and watched from the lawn near the Washington Monument. The Select Committee has learned about reports from outside the magnetometers and has obtained police radio transmissions identifying individuals with firearms, including AR-15s, near the Ellipse on the morning of January 6th. Let's listen.
Thank God, because no one ever
There's an individual who's in a tree.
listened to us when we said this.
He's gonna be a white male, about 6 feet tall, 10 bills, brown cowboy boots. He's got blue jeans and a blue jean jacket, and underneath the blue jean jacket, the complainants both saw a stock with AR-15. He's gonna be with a group of individuals, about five to eight other individuals. Two of the individuals in that group at the base of the tree near the porta potties were wearing green fatigues, green olive drab style fatigues, about 5'8", 5'9", skinny white males, brown cowboy boots. They had Glock style pistols in their waistband.
8736 with the message that subject weapon on his
That
right
description
hip.
fit thousands that
Yeah,
day.
he's in the tree.
Motor 1, make sure PPD knows they have an elevated threat in the tree south side of Constitution Avenue. Look for the "Don't Tread on Me" flag, American flag face mask, cowboy boots, weapon on the right side hip.
I got 3 men walking down the street in fatigue while carrying AR-15. Copy at 14th and Independent.
Jesus, I was right there.
AR-15s at 14th and Independence. As you
Nightmare.
saw in those emails, the first report that we showed, we now know was sent in the 8 o'clock hour on January 6th. This talked about people in the crowd wearing ballistic helmets and body armor, carrying radio equipment and military-grade backpacks. The second report we showed you on the screen was sent by the Secret Service in the 11 a.m. hour, and it addressed reports of a man with a rifle near the Ellipse. Ms. Hutchinson, in prior testimony, you described for us a meeting in the White House around 10 a.m. in the morning of January 6th, involving Chief of Staff Meadows and Tony Ornato. Were you in that meeting?
I was.
Let's listen to your testimony about that meeting, and then we'll have some questions.
I think the last time we talked, you mentioned that some of the weapons that people had at the rally included flagpoles, oversized sticks or flagpoles, bear spray. Is there anything else that you recall hearing about that the people who would gather on the ellipse had?
I recall Tony and I having a conversation with Mark probably around 10 a.m., 10:15 a.m., where I remember Tony mentioning knives, guns in the form of pistols and rifles, bear spray, body armor, spears, and flagpoles. Spears were one item, flagpoles were one item, and then Tony had relayed to me something to the effect of, and these effing people are fastening spears onto the ends of flagpoles.
Ms. Hutchinson, here's a clip of your testimony regarding Mr. Meadows' response to learning that the rally attendees were armed that day.
What was Mark's reaction, Mr. Meadows' reaction to this list of weapons that people had in the crowd?
When Tony and I went in to talk to Mark that morning, Mark was sitting on his couch and on his phone, which was something typical. And I remember Tony just got right into it. I was like, sorry, I just want to let you know, and had informed him, like, this is how many people we have outside the mags right now. These are the weapons that we're known to have. It's possible he listed more weapons off that I just don't recall. And gave him a brief but and concise explanation, but also fairly thorough. And I remember distinctly Mark not looking up from his phone. And I remember Tony finishing his explanation.
Mother
and it took
effer.
A few seconds for Mark to say something to the point where I almost said, Mark, did you hear him? And then Mark chimed in and was like, all right, anything else? Still looking down at his phone. And Tony looked at me and I looked at Tony and Tony said, no, sir, do you have any questions?
Anything else?
What are you hearing? And I looked at Tony and I was like, sir, he just told you about what was happening down at the rallies. And he was like, yeah, I know. And then he looked up and said, have you talked to the president? And Tony said, yes, sir, he's aware too. And he said, all right, good.
He asked Tony if Tony had informed the president.
Yes.
And Tony said, yes, he had.
Boom. That's it.
So Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that Mr. Ornato told the president about weapons at the rally on the morning of January 6th?
That's what Mr. Ornato relayed to me.
And here's how you characterize Mr. Meadows' general response when people raised concerns about what could happen on January 6th.
Can we get him a tank?
So at the time, in the days leading up to the 6th, there were lots of public reports about how things might go bad on the 6th, even the potential for violence. If I'm hearing you correctly, what stands out to you is that Mr. Meadows did not share those concerns, or at least did not act on those concerns?
Did not act on those concerns would be accurate.
But other people raised them to him, like in this exchange, you mentioned that Mr. Ornato pulled him aside.
That's correct.
Ms. Hutchinson, we're going to show now an exchange of texts between you and Deputy Chief of Staff Ornato. And these text messages were exchanged while you were at the ellipse. In one text, you write, but the crowd looks good from this vantage point as long as we get the shot. He was effing furious. And the text messages also stress that President Trump kept mentioning the OTR and off the record movement. We're going to come back and ask you about that in a minute. But could you tell us, first of all, who it is in the text who was furious?
The he in that text that I was referring to was the president.
And why was he furious, Ms. Hutchinson?
He was furious because he wanted the arena that we had on the ellipse to be maxed out at capacity for all attendees. The advance team had relayed to him that the mags were free flowing. Everybody who wanted to come in had already come in, but he still was angry about the extra space and wanted more people to come in.
And did you go to the rally in the presidential motorcade?
I was there, yes, in the motorcade.
And were you backstage with the president and other members of his staff and family?
I was.
And you told us, Ms. Hutchinson, about particular comments that you heard while you were in the tent area.
Here we go.
When we were in the offstage announce area tent behind the stage, he was very concerned about the shot, meaning the photograph that we would get, because the rally space wasn't full. One of the reasons, which I previously stated, was because he wanted it to be full and for people to not feel excluded because they'd come far to watch him at the rally. And he felt the mags were at fault for not letting everybody in. But another leading reason, and likely the primary reason, is because he wanted it full and he was angry that we weren't letting people through the mags with weapons. What the Secret Service uses weapons and our weapons. But when we were in the offstage announce tent, I was part of a conversation.
Wow.
I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, you know, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
Oh my God.
Just to be clear, Ms. Hutchinson, is it your
Came over.
understanding that the president wanted to take the mags away and said that the armed individuals were not there to hurt him?
That's a fair assessment.
Holy shit.
The issue wasn't with the amount of space available in the official rally area only, but instead that people did not want to have to go through the mags. Let's listen to a portion of what you told us about that.
In this particular instance, it wasn't the capacity of our space, it was the mags and the people that didn't want to come through. And that's what Tony had been trying to relay to him that morning. You know, it's not the issues that we encountered on the campaign. We have enough space, or they don't want to come in right now. They have weapons that they don't want confiscated by the Secret Service, and they're fine on the mall. They can see you on the mall, and they want to march straight to the Capitol from the mall.
The president apparently wanted all attendees inside the official rally space and repeatedly said, quote, "They're not here to hurt me."
And just to be clear, so he was told again in that conversation, or was he told again in that conversation that people couldn't come through the mags because they had weapons?
Correct.
And that people, and his response was to say they can march to the Capitol from the ellipse.
Something to the effect of, take the effing mags away. They're not here to hurt me. Let them in, let my people in. They can march to the Capitol after the rally's over. They can march from the ellipse. Take the effing mags away. Then they can march to the Capitol.
Ms. Hutchinson, what we saw when those clips were playing were photos provided by the National Archives showing the president in the offstage tent before his speech on the ellipse. You were in some of those photos as well. And I just want to confirm that that is when you heard the president say the people with weapons weren't there to hurt him and that he wanted the Secret Service to remove the magnetometers.
That's correct. In the photos that you displayed, we were standing towards the front of the tent with the TVs, really close to where he would walk out to go onto the stage. These conversations happened 2 to 3 minutes before he took the stage that morning.
Let's reflect on that for a moment. President Trump was aware that a number of the individuals in the crowd had weapons and were wearing body armor. And here's what President Trump instructed the crowd to do.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down.
And of course he wasn't.
We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
And the crowd, as we know, did proceed to the Capitol. It soon became apparent to the Secret Service, including the Secret Service teams in the crowd, along with White House staff, that security at the Capitol would not be sufficient.
I've had 2 or 3 phone conversations with Mr. Ornato when we were at the ellipse, and then I had 4 men on Mr. Meadows' detail with me in between those individuals and then a few other bodies on the ground, just the Secret Service doing advance. They were getting notifications through their radios, and Mr. Ornato in one phone conversation had called me and said, make sure the chief knows that they're getting close to the Capitol. It's they're having trouble stacking bodies.
And Ms. Hutchinson, when you said they were having trouble stacking bodies, did you mean that law enforcement at the Capitol needed more people to defend the Capitol from the rioters?
It was becoming clear to us and to the Secret Service that Capitol Police officers were getting overrun at the security barricades outside of the Capitol building, and they were short people to defend the building against the rioters.
And you mentioned that Mr. Ornato was conveying this to you because he wanted you to tell Mr. Meadows. So did you tell Mr. Meadows that people were getting closer to the Capitol and that Capitol Police was having difficulty?
After I had the conversation with Mr. Meadows, after I had the conversation with Mr. Ornato, I went to have the discussion with Mr. Meadows. He was in a secure vehicle at the time making a call. So when I had gone over to the car, I went to open the door to let him know, and he had immediately shut it. I don't know who he was speaking with. It wasn't something that he regularly did, especially when I would go over to give him information. So I was a bit taken aback, but I didn't think much of it, and thinking that I would be able to have the conversation with him a few moments later.
And were you able to have that conversation a few moments later?
Probably about 20 to 25 minutes later. There was another period in between where he shut the door again. And then when he finally got out of the vehicle, we had the conversation. But at that point, there was a backlog of information that he should have been made aware of.
And so you opened the door to the control car and Mr. Meadows pulled it shut?
That's correct.
And he did that 2 times?
That's correct.
What a joyous
when
man he
you
must have been to work
Finally,
for.
we're able to give Mr. Meadows the information about the violence at the Capitol. What was his reaction?
He almost had a lack of reaction.
Oh,
I remember him saying,
devastating.
all right, something to the effect of, how much longer does the president have left in his speech?
Again, much of this information about the potential for violence was known or learned before the onset of the violence, early enough for President Trump to take steps to prevent it. He could, for example, have urged the crowd at the ellipse not to march to the Capitol. He could have condemned the violence immediately once it began, or he could have taken multiple other steps. But as we will see today and in later hearings, President Trump had something else in mind. One other question at this point, Ms. Hutchinson, were you aware of concerns that White House counsel Pat Cipollone or Eric Hirschman had about the language President Trump used in his ellipse speech?
There were many discussions the morning of the 6th about the rhetoric of the speech that day. In my conversations with Mr. Hirschman, he had relayed that we would be foolish to include language that had been included at the president's request, which had lines along to the effect of, fight for Trump, we're going to march to the Capitol, I'll be there with you, fight for me, fight for what we're doing, fight for the movement. Things about the vice president at the time too. Both Mr. Hirschman and White House counsel's office were urging the speechwriters to not include that language for legal concerns and also for the optics of what it could portray the president wanting to do that day.
Well, that's
And
what
we
he
just
wanted.
heard the president say that he would be with his supporters as they marched to the Capitol, even though he did not end up going. He certainly wanted to. Some have questioned whether President Trump genuinely planned
I don't
to come
think he
here
ever
to the
wanted
Capitol
to.
on January 6th. In his book, Mark Meadows falsely wrote that after President Trump gave his speech on January 6th, he told Mr. Meadows that he was, quote, speaking metaphorically about the walk to the Capitol. As you will see, Donald Trump was not speaking metaphorically.
Yeah.
As we heard earlier, Rudy Giuliani told Ms. Hutchinson that Mr. Trump plans to travel to the Capitol on January 6th. I want to pause for just a moment to ask you, Ms. Hutchinson, to explain some of the terminology you will hear today. We've heard you use 2 different terms to describe plans for the president's movement to the Capitol or anywhere else. One of those is a scheduled movement, and another one is OTR. Could you describe for us what each of those mean?
A scheduled presidential movement is on his official schedule. It's notified to the press and to a wide range of staff that will be traveling with him. It's known to the public, known to the Secret Service, and they're able to coordinate the movement days in advance. An off-the-record movement is confined to the knowledge of a very, very small group of advisors and staff. Typically, a very small group of staff would travel with him, mostly that are just included in the national security package. You can pull an off-the-record movement together in less than an hour. It's a way to kind of circumvent having to release it to the press, if that's the goal of it, or to not have to have as many security parameters put in place ahead of time to make the movement happen.
Thank you. And let's turn back now to the president's plans to travel to the Capitol on January 6th. We know that White House counsel Pat Cipollone was concerned about the legal implications of such a trip, and he agreed with the Secret Service that it shouldn't happen. Ms. Hutchinson, did you have any conversations with Pat Cipollone about his concerns about the president going to the Capitol on January 6th?
On January 3rd, Mr. Cipollone had approached me, knowing that Mark had raised the prospect of going up to the Capitol on January 6th. Mr. Cipollone and I had a brief private conversation where he said to me, we need to make sure that this doesn't happen. This would be legally a terrible idea for us. We have serious legal concerns if we go up to the Capitol that day. And he then urged me to continue relaying that to Mr. Meadows, because it's my understanding that Mr. Cipollone thought that Mr. Meadows was indeed pushing this along with the president.
And we understand, Ms. Hutchinson, that you also spoke to Mr. Cipollone on the morning of the 6th as you were about to go to the rally on the Ellipse. And Mr. Cipollone said something to you like, make sure the movement to the Capitol does not happen. Is that correct?
That's correct. I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
Oh my God.
And do you remember which crimes Mr. Cipollone was concerned with?
In the days leading up to the 6th, we had conversations about potentially obstructing justice or defrauding the electoral count.
What?
Let's hear about some of those concerns that you mentioned earlier in one of your interviews with us.
Having a private conversation with Pat late in the afternoon of the 3rd or the 4th, that Pat was concerned it would look like we were obstructing justice or obstructing the electoral college count. And I apologize for probably not being very firm with my legal terms here, but that it would look like we were obstructing what was happening on Capitol Hill. And he was also worried that it would look like we were inciting a riot or encouraging a riot to erupt on the Capitol, at the Capitol.
In fact, in the days before January 6th and on January 6th itself, President Trump expressed to multiple White House aides that he wanted to go to the Capitol after his speech. Here's what various White House aides have told the committee about the president's desire to go to the Capitol.
Did the president tell you this, that he wanted to speak at the Capitol?
Correct, yes.
During the meeting in the dining room, did the idea of the president proceeding or walking to the Capitol on the 6th after his speech come up?
Walking to the Capitol? No.
Driving to the Capitol?
It came up.
Okay, how did it come up and what was discussed?
You brought it up. You said, I want to go down to the Capitol.
What about him marching to the Capitol on the 6th?
He's never walked that far in his life.
Maybe a golf cart.
Yeah.
It's kind of a general thing.
Yeah, he'd take a golf cart to the Capitol.
I was aware of a desire of the president
or the tank
to potentially march to the or accompany the rally attendees to the Capitol.
When did you first hear about this idea of the president accompanying rally attendees to the Capitol on the 6th?
Well, this was at the 6th. This was during the after he finished his remarks.
When the president said that he would be going to the Capitol during his speech on the Ellipse, the Secret Service scrambled to find a way for him to go. We know this from witnesses and the Secret Service, also from messages among staff on the President's National Security Council. The NSC staff were monitoring the situation in real time, and you can see how the situation evolved in the following chat log that the committee has obtained.
Hoo-hoo.
As you can see, NSC staff believed that Mogul, the president, was, quote, going to the Capitol, and, quote, they are finding the best route now.
That's
From
a
these
Secret
chats,
Service.
We also know that
So
staff
embarrassing.
learned of the attack on the Capitol in real time.
Well, that was far
President
different
Trump
than the
left the Ellipse stage at 1:10.
the nickname that he
Staff
got. But
knew that rioters had invaded the inaugural stage, and Capitol Police were calling for all available officers to respond.
That was 1 p.m.
When Republican leader Kevin McCarthy heard the president say he was going to the Capitol, he called you, Ms. Hutchinson. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And in this text message, you told Tony Ornato, quote, McCarthy just called me too. And do you guys think you're coming to my office? Tell us about the call that day with Leader McCarthy during the president's speech on the Ellipse.
I was still in the tent behind the stage, and when you're behind the stage, you can't really hear what's going on in front of you. So when Mr. McCarthy called me with this information, I answered the call and he sounded rushed, but also frustrated and angry at me. And I was confused because I didn't know what the president had just said. He then explained, the president just said he's marching to the Capitol. You told me this whole week you aren't coming up here. Why would you lie to me? I said, I'm not lying. I wasn't lying to you, sir. We're not going to the Capitol. And he said, well, he just said it on stage, Cassidy. Figure it out. Don't come up here. I said, I'll run the traps on this and I'll shoot you a text. I can assure you we're not coming up to the Capitol. We've already made that decision. He pressed a little bit more, believing me, but I think frustrated that
Donald
the
the
president had
Grifter.
said that. And we ended the phone conversation after that. I called Mr. Ornato to reconfirm that we weren't going to the Capitol, and which was also in our text messages. I sent Mr. McCarthy another text telling him the affirmative that we were not going up to the Capitol, and he didn't respond after that.
And we understand, Ms. Hutchinson, that the plans for the president to come up to the Capitol had included discussions at some point about what the president would do when he came up to the Capitol on January 6th. Let's look at a clip of one of your interviews discussing that issue with the committee.
When you were talking about a scheduled movement, did anyone say what the president wanted to do when he got here?
No. Not that I can specifically remember. I remember hearing a few different ideas discussed between Mark and Scott Perry, Mark and Rudy Giuliani. I don't know which conversations were elevated to the president. I don't know what he personally wanted to do when he went up to the Capitol that day. I know that there were discussions about him having another speech outside of the Capitol before going in. I know that there was a conversation about him going into the House chamber at one point.
As we've all just heard, in the days leading up to January 6th, on the day of the speech, both before and during and after the rally speech, President Trump was pushing his staff to arrange for him to come up here to the Capitol during the electoral vote count. Let's turn now to what happened in the president's vehicle when the Secret Service told him he would not be going to the Capitol after his speech. First, here is the president's motorcade leaving the ellipse after his speech on January 6th. Ms. Hutchinson, when you returned to the White House in the motorcade after the president's speech, where did you go?
When I returned to the White House, I walked upstairs towards the Chief of Staff's office, and I noticed Mr. Ornato lingering outside of the office. Once we had made eye contact, he quickly waved me to go into his office, which was just across the hall from mine. When I went in, he shut the door, and I noticed Bobby Engel, who is the head of Mr. Trump's security detail, sitting in a chair, just looking somewhat discombobulated and a little lost. I looked at Tony, and he had said, "Did you effing hear what happened in the Beast?" I said, "No, Tony, I just got back. What happened?" Tony proceeded to tell me that when the president got in the Beast, he was under the impression from Mr. Meadows that the off-the-record movement to the Capitol was still possible and likely to happen, but that Bobby had more information. So once the president had gotten into the vehicle with Bobby, he thought that they were going up to the Capitol, and when Bobby had relayed to him, "We're not, you don't have the assets to do it, it's not secure, we're going back to the West Wing," the president had very strong, a very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president. Take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel.
Jesus Christ.
Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicle.
This guy's going down. Bye-bye, Donnie.
And was Mr. Engel in the room as Mr. Ornato told you this story?
He was.
Did Mr. Engel correct or disagree with any part of the story from Mr. Ornato?
Mr. Engel did not correct or disagree with any part of the story.
Did Mr. Engel or Mr. Ornato ever after that tell you that what Mr. Ornato had just said was untrue?
Neither Mr. Ornato nor Mr. Engel told me ever that it was untrue.
And despite this altercation, this physical altercation during the ride back to the White House, President Trump still demanded to go to the Capitol. Here's what Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary at the time, wrote in her personal notes and told the committee about President Trump's desire to go to the Capitol after returning to the White House.
When you wrote POTUS wanted to walk to the Capitol, was that based solely on what the president said during his speech or anything that he or anybody else said afterwards?
So to the best of my recollection, I believe when we got back to the White House, he said he wanted to physically walk with marchers. And according to my notes, he then said he'd be fine with just riding the beast. But to the best of my recollection, he wanted to be a part of the march in some fashion.
Okay, and just for the record, the beast refers to the presidential limousine?
Yes.
President Trump did not go to the Capitol that day. We understand that he blamed Mark Meadows for that.
So prior to leaving the rally site, when he got off the stage and everybody was making the movement back to the motorcade, I had overheard Mr. Meadows say to him then, as I had prior to Mr. Trump taking the stage that morning, that he was still working on getting an off-the-record movement to the Capitol. So when Mr. Trump took the stage, he was under the impression via Mr. Meadows that it was still possible. So when he got off the stage, I had relayed to Mr. Meadows that I had another conversation with Tony. The movement was still not possible. Mr. Meadows said, okay. And then as they proceeded to go to the motorcade, and Mr. Meadows had reiterated, we're going to work on it, sir. Talk to Bobby. Bobby has more information. Mark got into his vehicle, to my understanding. Trump got into the Beast. And after we had all arrived back at the White House, later in the day, it had been relayed to me via Mark that the president wasn't happy that Bobby didn't pull it off for him and that Mark didn't work hard enough to get the movement on the books.
Junior staff saved the
physical
country.
altercation
Details
Ms.
at 11.
Hutchinson described in the presidential vehicle was not the first time that the president had become very angry about issues relating to the election. On December 1, 2020, Attorney General Barr said in an interview that the Department of Justice had now not found evidence of widespread election fraud sufficient to change the outcome of the election. Ms. Hutchinson, how did the president react to hearing that news?
Around the time that I understand the AP article went live, I remember hearing noise coming from down the hallway. So I poked my head out of the office and I saw the valet walking towards our office. He had said, get the chief down to the dining room. The president wants him. So Mark went down to the dining room and came back to the office a few minutes later. After Mark had returned, I left the office and went down to the dining room. And I noticed that the door was propped open and the valet was inside the dining room changing the tablecloth off of the dining room table. He motioned for me to come in and then pointed towards the front of the room near the fireplace mantle and the TV, where I first noticed there was ketchup dripping down the wall and there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor.
Fucking baby.
The valet
Classic.
had
Ketchup
articulated that the
dripping down the
president
wall.
was extremely angry
I
at
saw this
the
in
Attorney
a movie
General's
once.
AP interview and had thrown his lunch against the wall, which was causing them to have to clean up. So I grabbed a towel and started wiping the ketchup off of the wall to help the valet out.
And women are too emotional to
He
be.
said something to the effect of, he's really ticked off about this. I would stay clear of him for right now. He's really, really ticked off about this right now.
And Ms.
It's a fucking
Hutchinson,
baby.
was this the only instance that you are aware of where the president threw dishes?
It's not.
And are there other instances in the dining room that you recall where he expressed his anger?
My question is,
There
why
were
didn't
several
any of
times
these
throughout my
people
tenure as
come
the chief of staff that I
forward
was aware
sooner?
of him either throwing dishes or flipping the tablecloth to let all the contents of the table go onto the floor.
This
let the
vile,
breaker
this delusional,
go everywhere.
this anti-democratic.
And Ms. Hutchinson,
Why do
Attorney
you wait
General
till you're
Barr
subpoenaed to suddenly
described to
go
the
at
committee the
hair?
president's
Are you that
angry
afraid of Donald
reaction
Trump?
when
Screw
he
him.
finally met
Tell the
with
damn
President
truth.
Trump.
Sorry.
Let's listen.
And I said, look, I know that you're dissatisfied with me, and I'm glad to offer my resignation. And he pounded the table very hard. Everyone sort of jumped, and he said, accept it.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. The chair requests those in the hearing room to remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted our witness from the room. Pursuant to the order of the committee of today, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
Okay.
Well, we wanted a bombshell.
First of all, I'm happy that I'm still capable of being horrified and shocked. Not surprised, but holy fucking shit, horrified. Like Brian said, that this was going on. I'm also deeply worried about her. And yeah, this 20-something-year-old.
She was 23 at the time.
She's at the front line of I mean, what in God's
Front line
name
of hell
is happening?
Mitch McConnell better be demanding security for lifetime for her right now.
He better. He won't, but he'd better. Okay, so Norm, hi. Oh boy. So was this as advertised, or did it exceed expectations?
I would say this exceeded every expectation that I could have imagined. We knew beforehand, John Dean had said we had a moment with Alexander Butterfield back when we learned about the tapes. That was stunning. And this had better be that kind of moment. So one, when you learn that President Trump said, they got weapons, fucking weapons, send them down there. They're not going after me. I mean, I actually tweeted, this is one of those presidential statements that will go down like 7 years ago.
Yep.
You have nothing to fear but fear itself. Ich bin ein Berliner. And this is Trump's legacy.
Yeah, that's his motto forever.
Assaulting a Secret Service officer, going for his throat.
Yeah.
This man,
needs to go.
We refer to him as a narcissistic sociopath. Psychopath is the word that needs to be applied to Donald Trump.
Michael Cohen told us this in 2019.
Yeah.
Sitting in front of Congress, he laid it out exactly what was going to happen, exactly what we should watch out for, and even admonished the Republicans for following him as he had and how it would lead down to a very bad place. And here we are, folks. You've got the President of the United States lunging at someone to try and grab control of a car. And why in the hell did we have to wait until now to hear this? For the love of God.
He probably threw that plate at somebody's head too. I mean, and that's it. This is, yes, Donald needs to go down. He needs to be in prison forever. However,
I love this witness.
Every person who sat on it, who's still refusing, we need to hang this around all of their necks, because this is the entire Republican Party. It's not
Kevin
just one
McCarthy, Mitch McConnell at the start. But not only does Donald have to go to jail, Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows, Scott Perry, all these other members of Congress, we're going to learn a lot more about them too. who are all in on this seditious conspiracy.
That's right.
This
Kathy, you
is-
raised your hand.
I am trying to be polite. Do we know if Bobby, the Secret Service guy, has cooperated or if he is allowed to?
Yes, under Secret Service rule, under the rule of law, he can't testify as to personal coming goings. I believe this is right of the president. But an action like that, an action of an assault, yeah, that's
A crime,
something
right? It's like the crime fraud exception.
Right.
For
Have they
Secret
talked to
Service.
him yet?
Pardon?
I don't.
Have they talked to him yet?
Well, here's the deal.
In
And
DC, the crime is APO, assault on a police officer.
Yeah, but here's the deal. We now know that there is definitely a grand jury seated somewhere handling the information that the Department of Justice is gathering. We've seen two people taking down Jeffrey Clark thrown in the front yard in his PJs, and which I still want to see that picture,
right.
and the phone records. So we know that's ongoing, and so we know at a bare minimum.
Let's stick with what's just happened.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We know at a bare minimum they do have a conversation with this guy. They would have to. If the hearing knows about this, then I'll guarantee you the DOJ has already interviewed this guy on the record.
Okay, Jen, you're muted.
I know. Sorry, it's Brian's fault because he sent me a DM about something unrelated, and I was trying to be polite and get back to him. Brian,
I'm sorry.
Behave.
Yeah, well,
We're passing notes in class.
I am sickened. Like, I have chills for exactly. I just want to reiterate these things. Everybody knew. Number one, they put it on a young woman who was going to fail at this task. They knew it. To stop, it was her job to stop Donald. Okay. Secondly, everyone in that room knew, and Pat Cipollone made clear what the legal concerns were, and they went ahead. And to me, the most chilling thing is as Donald was telling those folks to go down to the Capitol, he absolutely knew that they were armed. Yep. And he knew because they couldn't come. I mean, I'm repeating what we all just heard, but he fucking assaulted a Secret Service officer and no one says anything. And my last thing is, you mean to tell me the FBI doesn't know this and Merrick Garland doesn't know this yet?
Right.
This isn't enough? I mean, that's why I just tweeted out, where are you at, Merrick? I mean,
and
what the
right.
hell?
And Waj, like, seriously, we can't ever let any of this go. We need to continue to be horrified and shocked and sickened because the enormity of this is stunning.
Yeah, there's I tweeted this out because I thought it was so appropriate. Ketchup dripping down the walls, which is just the most beautiful metaphor for the Trump administration and his narcissistic personality. The question usually is who knew? So Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony says everyone knew. When did they know it? From the start. And so as a recovering attorney, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, they indicted the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers for seditious conspiracy. Based on this testimony, it seems that Mark Meadows, Giuliani, and Donald Trump were part and parcel of the seditious conspiracy. There will probably be more names. There are pardons that were sought. So I want to know more names of the people seeking pardons and how involved they were. If I was Mark Meadows, and in fact, if I was part of the Trump cabal right now, after this testimony, during this recess right now, I would pick up the phone and call my lawyer. Because for the next maybe 2 days, maybe a day, you have this very brief window where you have a decision to make. Am I going to sing like a canary and save myself, or am I going to go down with the ship? Now, in the absence of any indictments or in the absence of any prosecutions, then that's where I think that the American people have every right to lose faith in Merrick Garland and the Justice Department. Because based on what we've heard right now, they should be just straight up, there should be indictments. You can indict a ham sandwich. That's what we used to say in law school, right? Mm-hmm. This is a double-decker ham sandwich. You got like evidence, facts. This is a ham sandwich with ketchup on it, dripping from the walls.
Dripping from the walls.
So, I mean, the thing is this murder.
Make it really
attempted murder. This is sedition.
Right.
This is
obstruction, sedition, assault, fraud.
Obstruction, fraud.
And obviously the law, the policy, the horror of what they've done to our democracy is the most important thing here. But again, I have to speak as the political consultant guy and the guy who pisses off, just loses my mind at Democrats who are like, oh yeah, it was only Trump. Trump's horrible. He's an aberration, and Republicans are reasonable. If I hear that those words said again, again, I wrote ads for Biden, but I don't want to hear those words again.
Cliff, I'm
And
going
I
to
don't
throw a
wanna hear those
ketchup bottle
words from
against the
some of our
wall.
other
I'm going to throw
leadership.
the ketchup bottle against the wall.
Yeah, I don't want to hear words from other leadership about reasonable Republicans or decent Republicans or whatever. They are all seditionists. As far as I'm concerned, until they're guilty
two
till
on the
proven
committee,
innocent.
I'll give a
They all
nod.
knew about this. They all allowed this to happen. They all injured, and in the end, people died because of what they did. People smeared feces on the walls of our political chapel, so to speak.
Right.
All these people, this indictment also needs to be a political indictment that we run from now through the election.
Right.
Constantly messaging this.
Yeah, Allie, and then Kathy, before we have to go back.
Jesus
Just and it seems pretty clear that the only reason Republicans in the Capitol didn't want this to happen is because they were afraid. But they're perfect. They were perfectly comfortable with what the results that Donald et al. Wanted to achieve, right?
Yeah. No, it seemed like Mark Meadows, Kevin McCarthy, and Steve Scalise were totally okay with it happening because they knew that they wouldn't be the ones that were targeted, just like how Trump said that they weren't there to hurt him. And they knew from the very beginning of the day that they had knives, pistols, and spears on flagpoles, and they sent them to the Capitol anyway. So I think that right there is just enough to like incriminate them as we learn about all that. So and prior to that, they even had concern from the DNI, John Ratcliffe, knowing that there was a huge threat of violence, and they didn't listen. So that's how it played out, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah, and Kathy, any thoughts before we head back in? Because I mean, my mind is completely blown.
Just reminds me of how horrible of a DNI Ratcliffe was. But the idea that he just decided to like peace out, like not my mom, not my monkey, not my circus. It's like, okay, thanks. Also, I have trouble. I go back and forth about thinking if Donald really wanted to walk there, because I think he's really a pussy and I think he's very fearful. But I also think he's so nuts. He has a vision of like bursting into the chamber and stealing the boxes and like whatever he thought Pence could do. And the other thing I'm curious to see if comes up, do you guys remember that Marjorie Taylor Greene was on Air Force One, January 5th, to go to Georgia because they were trying to start shit with Warnock? I want to know if this gal was on that plane ride on Air Force One. Because remember Margie came down for
They
the
have a log.
Yes.
Yeah.
What a lot of stuff happened to around Loeffler, Warnock, that area too, because they were convinced they could fix it. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Norm, and if she was, we're going to find out. Norm, the part of this, again, none of it's surprising, but just horrifying and shocking that somebody that out of control, somebody that violent was just allowed to play king and get away with it. He's a free man. How many crimes did he commit?
Well, and we haven't
Day
even
or in a lifetime.
We haven't even talked about the fraud, the $250 million. But that aside, when they said they were using the name mogul, I thought, why didn't they use the name grifter? But I want to reflect for a minute on the moral cowardice of Republicans in Congress. Kevin McCarthy calls the White House and says, call off the dogs, get them out of here, because he knew that if the mob came through, they weren't going to distinguish members of Congress one from the other. They were shitting in their pants at what was going to happen. And Mitch McConnell knew what had happened and engineered it, first McCarthy, to turn right around and protect Trump, to vote that same day with all of the others that the election had been stolen. That you have all of these Republicans in the Senate, like Ben Sass, the supposed moderates, and others who were going to let this pass. You had all but 8 Republicans in the Senate who voted against impeaching him, and removing him from office, keeping him from running again. But I'll say one last thing, Mary. I think now after this testimony, you're going to see a whole lot of these Republicans try and cast him adrift because they don't want it to reflect on them, even as they're planning for, which is going to be to try and do this with the active connivance of the Alito court and all these people they want to elect who are going to steal the election without having to have a violent mob assault the Capitol. We cannot let that happen.
No fucking way. Right, Norm. Thank you. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, John. Couldn't agree more.
I mean, I didn't think I could be more enraged I didn't think I could be surprised, but fucking McCarthy staring down at his phone. I mean, that is
Meadows.
Sorry, Meadows. I'm sorry, Meadows. They look alike, but yes,
They really do.
Meadows, the chief of staff,
All
staring
white
down at his
guys do.
phone when he is being told, and that what is going to happen, and he was kind of like, it's gonna and then he warned Cassidy, well, it's gonna get really bad. Well, all of it's there. Why is this guy? Where's the grand jury? Bring him back. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm just stunned. And how is it possible the Justice Department didn't get to this witness first? How is this even possible? And is it because, okay, I'm going to just get nuts. Do you think she'd rather talk to this committee because she thinks it's just going to go, she doesn't trust that the Justice Department's actually going to do something about it?
Interesting. I think that's an interesting point. I mean, and also, did you guys hear that? I think Hugh Hollow said that there's like a bomb squad around the Capitol.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I haven't checked. Like, is anybody on right-wing social media yet? Like, anybody
No,
checked?
but imagine the threats this poor.
Oh,
I can't even.
Well,
Yeah.
right now, I the chief of police for the Capitol Police I know that they have taken special precaution today for this.
There you go.
Hi, guys.
Right.
Well, Jen, real quick to your point, I was hearing that you wanted to jump the gun and talk publicly first before talking to the Justice Department. So the timing here, that's why they were like, had to jump on it.
Committee will
That's a
be
good
in
reason.
order.
I like that reason.
Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Vice Chair Cheney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we turn to what Ms. Hutchinson saw and heard in the White House during the violent attack on the Capitol on January 6th, let's discuss certain communications White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows had on January 5th. President Trump's associate, Roger Stone, attended rallies during the afternoon and the evening of January 5th in Washington, D.C. On January 5th and 6th, Mr. Stone was photographed with multiple members of the Oath Keepers who were allegedly serving as his security detail. As we now know, multiple members of that organization have been charged with or pled guilty to crimes associated with January 6th. Mr. Stone has invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination before this committee. General Michael Flynn has also taken the fifth before this committee. Mr. Stone previously had been convicted of other federal crimes unrelated to January 6th. General Flynn had pleaded guilty to a felony charge also predating and unrelated to January 6th. President Trump pardoned General Flynn just weeks after the presidential election. And in July of 2020, he commuted the sentence Roger Stone was to serve. The night before January 6th, President Trump instructed his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, to contact both Roger Stone and Michael Flynn regarding what would play out the next day. Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that President Trump asked Mark Meadows to speak with Roger Stone and General Flynn on January 5th?
That's correct. That is my understanding.
And Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that Mr. Meadows called Mr. Stone on the 5th?
I'm under the impression that Mr. Meadows did complete both a call to Mr. Stone and General Flynn the evening of the 5th.
She might run for
And
president.
do you know what they talked about that evening, Ms. Hutchinson?
I'm not sure.
Is it your understanding that Mr. Giuliani, Mr. Eastman, and others had set up what has been called, quote, a war room at the Willard Hotel on the night of the 5th?
I was aware of that the night of the 5th.
And do you know if Mr. Meadows ever intended to go to the Willard Hotel on the night of the 5th?
Mr. Meadows had a conversation with me where he wanted me to work with Secret Service on a movement from the White House to the Willard Hotel so he could attend the meeting or meetings with Mr. Giuliani and his associates in the war room.
And what was your view as to whether or not Mr. Meadows should go to the Willard that night?
I had made it clear to Mr. Meadows that I didn't believe it was a smart idea for him to go to the Willard Hotel that night. I wasn't sure everything that was going on at the Willard Hotel, although I knew enough about what Mr. Giuliani and his associates were pushing during this period. I didn't think that it was something appropriate for the White House Chief of Staff to attend or to consider involvement in. I made that clear to Mr. Meadows. Throughout the afternoon, he mentioned a few more times going up to the Willard Hotel that evening, and then eventually dropped the subject the night of the 5th and said that he would dial in instead.
So General Flynn has appeared before this committee. And when he appeared before our committee, he took the 5th. Let's briefly view a clip of General Mike Flynn taking the 5th Amendment. General Flynn, do you believe the violence on January 6th was justified?
Do we have?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad they considered it for so long.
All right, we're back. Congressman Cheney, could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. General Flynn, do you believe the violence on January 6th was justified?
Is that, can I get a clarification? Is that a moral question or are you asking?
God.
I'm asking both.
He's got to clear the toilet with this one.
Do you believe the violence on January 6th was
Star of this
justified
hearing
morally?
is silence.
Yeah.
Take the 5th.
You believe the violence on January 6th was justified legally?
5th.
General Flynn, do you believe in the peaceful transition of power in the United States of America?
The 5th.
Holy shit.
Let's move on now to January 6th.
Take the 5th on
Not
that.
if we lose.
Donald Trump and Mark Meadows during the attack on the Capitol. Ms. Hutchinson, I'd like now for us to listen to a description, your description of what transpired in the West Wing during the attack. For context, in this clip, you describe the time frame starting at about 2 p.m.
So I remember Mark being alone in his office for quite some time, and I know we've spoken about Ben Williamson going in at one point, and I don't personally remember Ben going in. I don't doubt that he had gone in, but I remember him being alone in his office for most of the afternoon. Around 2 o'clock to 2:05, around 2 o'clock to 2:05, we were watching the TV, and I could see that the rioters were getting closer and closer to the Capitol. Mark still hadn't popped out of his office or said anything about it. So that's when I went into his office. I saw that he was sitting on his couch on his cell phone. Same as the morning where he was just kind of scrolling and typing. I said, "Hey, are you watching the TV, Chief?" Because the TV was small and you can see it, but I didn't know if he was really paying attention. I said, "Are you watching the TV, Chief?" And he was like, "Yeah." The rioters are getting really close. Have you talked to the president? He said, "No, he wants to be alone right now." Still looking at his phone. So I start to get frustrated because I sort of felt like I was watching this is not a great comparison, but a bad car accident that was about to happen where you can't stop it, but you want to be able to do something. And I remember thinking in that moment, Mark needs to snap out of this, and I don't know how to snap him out of this, but he needs to care. And I just remember I blurted out, I said, "Mark, do you know where Jim's at right now?" And he looked up at me at that point and said, "Jim?" I said, "Mark, he was on the floor a little while ago giving a floor speech. Did you listen?" He said, "Yeah, it was real good. Did you like it?" And I said, "Yeah." "Do you know where he's at right now?" He said, "No, I haven't heard from him." And I said, "You might want to check in with him, Mark." And I remember pointing at the TV and I said, "The rioters are getting close. They might get in." And he looked at me and said something to the effect of, "All right, I'll give him a call."
Not long after the rioters broke into the Capitol, you described what happened with White House counsel Pat Cipollone.
No more than a minute a minute and a half later, I see Pat Cipollone barreling down the hallway towards our office and rushed right in, looked at me, said, "Is Mark in his office?" And I said, "Yes." He just looked at me and started shaking his head and went over, opened Mark's office door, stood there with the door propped open, and said something to the, Mark is still sitting on his phone. I remember like glancing and he's still sitting on his phone. And I remember Pat saying to him something to the effect of, "The rioters have gotten to the Capitol, Mark. We need to go down and see the president now." And Mark looked up at him and said, "He doesn't want to do anything, Pat." And Pat
Oh
said
my
something
God.
to the effect of, and very clearly had said this to Mark, something to the effect of, "Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands. This is getting out of control. I'm going down there." And at that point, Mark stood up from his couch, both of his phones in his hand. He had his glasses on still. He walked out with Pat. He put both of his phones on my desk and said, "Let me know if Jim calls." And they walked out and went down to the dining room.
A few minutes later, Representative Jordan called back.
A couple minutes later, so likely around between 2:15 and 2:25. I know the tweet went out at 2:24. I don't remember if I was there when the tweet went out or if it happened right afterwards, but Jim had called. I answered the phone, said, "1 second." He knew it was, I guess he knew it was me. I introduced myself, but I don't remember if he called my cell phone or if he had called one of Mark's. But I answered the phone and said, "1 sec, Mark's on the hall. I'm going to go hand the phone to him." He said, "Okay." So I went down. I asked the valet if Mark was in the dining room. The valet said yes. I opened the door to the dining room, briefly stepped in to get Mark's attention, showed him the phone, like flipped the phone his way so he could see it said Jim Jordan. He had stepped to where I was standing there holding the door open, took the phone talking to Jim with the door still propped open. So I took a few steps back. So I probably was 2 feet from Mark. He was standing in the doorway going to the Oval Office dining room. They had a brief conversation, and in the crossfires, I heard briefly like what they were talking about, but in the background, I had heard conversations in the Oval dining room at that point talking about the hang Mike Pence chants.
That clip ended, Ms. Hutchinson, with you recalling that you heard the president, Mr. Meadows, and the White House counsel discussing the hang Mike Pence chants. And then you described for us what happened next.
Wasn't until Mark hung up the phone, handed it back to me. I went back to my desk. A couple minutes later, him and Pat came back, possibly Eric Hirschman too. I'm pretty sure Eric Hirschman was there, but I'm confident it was Pat that was there. I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, "Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung." And Mark had responded something to the effect of, "You heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong."
Holy crap.
To which Pat said something,
"Oh my God,
this is effing crazy. We need to be doing something more." Briefly stepped into Mark's office. And when Mark had said something, when Mark had said something to the effect of, he doesn't think they're doing
This
anything
man has
wrong,
a spine of a jellyfish.
knowing what I had heard briefly in the dining room,
Or a
coupled
tub of
with
margarine.
Pat discussing the hang Mike Pence chants in the lobby of our office, and then Mark's response, I understood there to be the rioters in the Capitol that were chanting for the vice president to be hung.
Let me pause here on this point. As rioters chanted hang Mike Pence, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, said that, quote, Mike deserves it, and that those rioters were not doing anything wrong. This is a sentiment that he has expressed at other times as well. In an interview with ABC News correspondent Jonathan Karl, President Trump was asked about the supporters chanting hang Mike Pence last year. Instead of condemning them the former president defended them.
Said hang Mike
Because
Pence.
it's common sense, John. It's common sense that you're supposed to protect. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent, right?
Yeah.
How can you pass on a fraudulent vote to Congress?
President Trump's view that the rioters were not doing anything wrong and that, quote, Mike deserved it, helps us to understand why the president did not ask the rioters to leave the Capitol for multiple hours. In fact, he put this tweet out at 2:24 p.m. Ms. Hutchinson, do you recall seeing this tweet in which the president said the vice president did not have the courage to do what needed to be done?
I do.
Ms. Hutchinson, what was your reaction when you saw this tweet?
As a staffer that works to
She
always
looks so
represent
numb.
the administration to the best of my ability and to showcase the good things that he had done for the country, I remember feeling frustrated, disappointed, and really, it felt personal. I was really sad. As an American, I was disgusted.
As an American, I was
It was
disgusted.
unpatriotic. It was un-American. We were watching the Capitol building get defaced over a lie. And it was something that was really hard in that moment to digest, knowing what I'd been hearing down the hall in the conversations that were happening, seeing that tweet come up and knowing what was happening on the Hill. And it's something that I still struggled to work through the emotions of that.
Ms. Hutchinson, we have also spoken to multiple other White House staff about their reaction to Donald Trump's 2:24 tweet, condemning Mike Pence for not having the courage to refuse to count electoral votes, an act that would have been illegal. Matthew Pottinger, a former Marine intelligence officer who served in the White House for 4 years, including as Deputy National Security Advisor, was in the vicinity of the Oval Office at various points throughout the day. When he saw that tweet, he immediately decided to resign his position. Let's watch him describe his reaction to the president's tweet.
One of my staff brought me a printout of a tweet by the president. And the tweet said something to the effect that Mike Pence, the vice president, didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. I read that tweet and made a decision at that moment to resign. That's where I knew that I was leaving that day, once I read that tweet.
Ultimately, members of the White House staff, Sarah Matthews, cabinet members, Secretary Chao and Secretary DeVos resigned as well. Here is Secretary DeVos's resignation letter. As you can see, in resigning on January 6th, Secretary DeVos said to the president, quote, "There's no mistaking the impact your rhetoric had on the situation, and it is the inflection point for me." Let's also look at Secretary Chao's resignation statement. When Secretary Chao resigned, she spoke of the January 6th attack, and she said, quote, "As I am sure is the case with many of you, this has deeply troubled me in a way I simply cannot set aside." Ms. Hutchinson, in our prior interviews, we've asked you about what the president's advisors were urging him to do during the attack. You've described roughly 3 different camps of thought inside the White House that day. Can you tell us about those?
There was a group of individuals that were strongly urging him to take immediate and swift action. I would classify the White House counsel's office, Mr. Hirschman, Ms. Ivanka Trump, in that category of really working to get him to take action and pleading with him to take action. There was a more neutral group where advisors were trying to toe the line, knowing that Mr. Trump didn't necessarily want to take immediate action and condemn the riots, but knowing something needed to be done. And then there was the last group, which was deflect and blame. Let's blame Antifa. These aren't our people. It's my understanding that Mr. Meadows was in the deflect and blame category, but he did end up taking a more neutral route, knowing that there were several advisors in the president's circle urging him to take more action, which I think was reflected in the rhetoric released later that day in the videos.
There is no neutral
You told
route.
us that the White House counsel's office was in the camp encouraging the president to tell the rioters to stop the attack and to leave the Capitol. Let's listen.
White House counsel's office wanted there to be a strong statement out to condemn the rioters. I'm confident in that.
Now let's look at just one example of what some senior advisors to the president were urging. Ms. Hutchinson, could you look at the exhibit that we're showing on the screen now? Have you seen this note before?
That's a note that I wrote at the direction of the Chief of Staff on January 6th, likely around 3 o'clock.
And it's written on a Chief of Staff note card, but that's your handwriting, Ms. Hutchinson?
That's my handwriting.
And why did you write this note?
The Chief of Staff was in a meeting with Eric Hirschman and potentially Mr. Philbin, and they had rushed out of the office fairly quickly. Mark had handed me the note card with one of his pens and started dictating a statement for the president to potentially put out.
And no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. There were two phrases on there, one illegal and then one without proper authority. The illegal phrase was the one that Mr. Meadows had dictated to me. Mr. Hirschman had chimed in and said, also put without legal authority. There should have been a slash between the two phrases. It was an or if the president had opted to put one of those statements out. Evidently he didn't. Later that afternoon, Mark came back from the Oval Dining Room and put the palm card on my desk with illegally crossed out, but said we didn't need to take further action on that statement.
So, to your knowledge, this statement was never issued?
It was, to my knowledge, it was never issued.
And Ms. Hutchinson, did you understand that Ivanka Trump wanted her father to send people home?
That's my understanding, yes.
Let's play a clip of you addressing that issue.
And then she covered for him afterwards.
I remember her saying at various points, you know, she wanted her dad to send them home. She wanted her dad to tell them to go home peacefully, and she wanted to include language that he necessarily wasn't on board with at the time.
You will hear more about this at our later hearings.
Why
we
did
have
they
evidence
not
of many others,
step
imploring
forward?
Donald
Vote him
Trump
out.
and Mark
25th.
Meadows to
Yes.
take action. Here is some of that evidence. Text messages sent to Mark Meadows during the attack.
Because they're all unbelievable cowards.
This is a text message at 2:32 from Laura Ingram. Hey, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. And the next message, this is hurting all of us. And then he's destroying his legacy and playing into every stereotype. We lose all credibility against the BLM Antifa crowd if things go south. The president's son, Don Jr., also urgently contacted Mark Meadows. At 2:53, he wrote, he's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough. As you will see, these are just two of the numerous examples of Trump supporters and allies urging the president to tell his supporters to leave the Capitol. It would not have been hard for the president to simply walk down to the briefing room a few feet down the hall from the Oval Office. As Nora O'Donnell noted during an interview with House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, where Leader McCarthy said he believed the attack was un-American.
I want to quickly bring in Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader. Leader McCarthy, do you condemn this violence?
I completely condemn the violence in the Capitol. What we're currently watching unfold is un-American.
I'm disappointed. I'm sad. This is not what our country should look like. This is not who we are. This is not the First Amendment. This has to stop, and this has to stop now.
Leader
you are,
McCarthy,
McCarthy.
the President of the United States has a briefing room steps from the Oval Office.
There's a
It
story
is-
behind that
the cameras
question.
are hot 24/7, as you know. Why hasn't he walked down and said that now?
And we walked into the
conveyed to the
press
president what I
office,
think is
all
best
of
to
us
do,
in mass,
and I'm
and
hopeful the
asked
president will
this
do it.
question. From the time it
Republican
started,
House member
the
Mike
reporters
Gallagher
that were there
also
made a
implored
steady
the
stream
president to
into the
call off
White
the
House to
attack.
ask them to bring him down and to speak out, and he wouldn't
Mr.
do
President, you have got to stop this. You are the only person who can call this off. Call it off. The election is over. Call it off. This is bigger than you. It's bigger than any member of Congress. It is about the United States of America, which is more important than any politician. Call it off. It's over.
He liked the begging almost as
Despite
much
the
as he
fact
liked the
that many
violence.
people close to Donald Trump were urging him to send people home, he did not do so until later, much later. At 4:17 p.m., Donald Trump finally told the rioters to go home and that he loved them. Here's a portion of the video President Trump recorded from the White House.
We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
But as we will show in even greater detail in future hearings, Donald Trump was reluctant to put this message out, and he still could not bring himself to condemn the attack. Ms. Hutchinson has told us that too.
The one that he put out at 4:17.
I'm sure you've discussed it, and just to elaborate if I hadn't already at that point, I recall him being reluctant to film the video on the 6th. I was not involved in any of the logistics or the planning for that video. I just remember seeing the video go out and feeling a little shocked after it went out.
On the evening of January 6th and the day after, the president's family and his senior staff and others tried to encourage the president to condemn the violence and commit to the peaceful transition of power. At 3:31 p.m. on January 6th, Sean Hannity of Fox News texted Mark Meadows. Mr. Hannity said, quote, "Can he make a statement? I saw the tweet. Ask people to leave the Capitol." Later that evening, Mr. Hannity sent another text message to Mark Meadows. This time, he shared a link to a tweet. That tweet reported that President Trump's cabinet secretaries were considering invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. As you can see on the screen, the 25th Amendment to the Constitution creates a process for the transition of power if a president is unfit or unable to serve. 25th Amendment has never been used to remove a president. But the committee has learned that after the attack on the U.S. Capitol, this was being discussed by members of President Trump's cabinet as a way of stripping the full power of the presidency from Donald Trump. President Trump's supporters were worried. In addition to the tweet that he sent Mark Meadows after the attack, Sean Hannity apparently spoke with President Trump and warned him about what could happen. We understand that this text message that Sean Hannity sent to Kayleigh McEnany on January 7th shows what Mr. Hannity said to the president. First, no more stolen election talk. Second, impeachment and 25th Amendment are real. Many people will quit. Ms. Hutchinson, you told us that you were hearing about discussions related to the 25th Amendment. Here's part of what you said.
Mr. Pompeo reached out to have the conversation with Mr. Meadows in case he hadn't heard the discussions amongst cabinet secretaries.
I wonder who gave him the text
And
between
what I understand
Kayleigh
is
and
more of a-
Hannity, or if both did.
This is what I'm hearing I want you to be aware of it, but I also think it's worth putting on your radar because you are the chief of staff. You're technically the boss of all the cabinet secretaries, and if conversations progress, you should be ready to take action on this. Like, I'm concerned for you and your positioning with this. Reach out to me if you have any questions, or like I can be helpful with you at all.
Inside the White House, the president's advisors, including members of his family, wanted him to deliver a speech to the country. Deputy White House counsel Pat Philbin prepared the first draft of what would be the president's remarks on national healing, delivered by a pre-taped video on January 7th. When he arrived at the White House on the 7th, Mr. Philbin believed that more needed to be said, so he sat down and started writing. He shared the draft with Pat Cipollone, who also believed the president needed to say more. Mr. Cipollone agreed with the content, as did Eric Hirschman, who reviewed the draft. The committee has learned that the president did not agree with the substance as drafted and resisted giving a speech at all. Ms. Hutchinson, do you recall discussions about the president's speech on January 7th?
I do.
Let's listen, Ms. Hutchinson, to what you told us about that and about the process of crafting those remarks.
I learned from a conversation with Mark and overhearing between him and White House counsel and Eric Hirschman as well, that Trump didn't necessarily think he needed to do anything more on the 7th than what he had already done on the 6th. When he was convinced to put out a video on the 7th, I understand that he had a lot of opinions about what the context of that announcement were to entail. I had original drafts of the speech where there were several lines that didn't make it in there about prosecuting the rioters or calling them violent. He didn't want that in there. He wanted to put in there that he wanted to potentially pardon them. And this is just with the increased emphasis of his mindset at the time.
Did they knock over a liquor store too? They broke every other crime.
They did anything
criminal
wrong.
code. My God.
The people who did something wrong that day, or the person who did something wrong that day, was Mike Pence by not standing with him.
Oh my
The
God.
president's advisors urged him to give the speech.
Who convinced him to do the video on the 7th?
I'm not sure who convinced him or if it was a group of people that convinced him.
Who was in the group that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of: Mark, Ivanka, Jared Kushner, Eric Hirschman, Pat Cipollone, Pat Philbin. Those are the people that I'm aware of.
Do you know why that group of people thought it was necessary for him to release a statement?
I believe Kelly McEnany as well. From what I understood at the time, and from what the reports were coming in, there's a large concern of the 25th Amendment potentially being invoked, and there were concerns about what would happen in the Senate if the 25th was invoked. So the primary reason that I had heard, other than, we did not do enough on the 6th, we need to get a stronger message out there and condemn this, otherwise this will be our legacy. The secondary reason to that was, think about what might happen in the final 15 days of your presidency if we don't do this. There's already talks about invoking the 25th Amendment. You need this as cover.
The president ultimately delivered the remarks. Unlike many of his other speeches, he did not ad-lib much. He recited them without significant alteration, except one. Even then, on January 7th, 2021, the day after the attack on the U.S. Capitol, the president still could not bring himself to say, quote, "But this election is now over." One other point about the speech, Ms. Hutchinson, did you hear that Mr. Trump at one point wanted to add language about pardoning those who took part in the January 6th riot?
I did hear that, and I understand that Mr. Meadows was encouraging that language as well.
Thank you. And here's what you told us previously about that.
You said he was instructed not to include it. Who was instructing him not to include language about the pardon in that January 7th
I understood from White House counsel's office coming into our office that morning that they didn't think that it was a good idea to include that in the speech.
That being Pat Cipollone.
That's correct. And Eric Hirschman.
Ms. Hutchinson, did Rudy Giuliani ever suggest that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
He did.
Ms. Hutchinson, did White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows ever indicate that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
Mr. Meadows did seek that pardon. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I want to thank our witness for joining us today. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witness, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objections, members will be permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witness. Without objection, the chair recognizes the vice chair for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by thanking Ms. Hutchinson for her testimony today. We are all in her debt. Our nation is preserved by those who abide by their oaths to our Constitution. Our nation is preserved by those who know the fundamental difference between right and wrong. And I want all Americans to know that what Ms. Hutchinson has done today is not easy. The easy course is to hide from the spotlight, to refuse to come forward, to attempt to downplay or deny what happened. That brings me to a different topic. While our committee has seen many witnesses, including many Republicans, testify fully and forthrightly, this has not been true of every witness. And we have received evidence of one particular practice that raises significant concern. Our committee commonly asks witnesses connected to Mr. Trump's administration or campaign whether they've been contacted by any of their former colleagues or anyone else who attempted to influence or impact their testimony. Without identifying any of the individuals involved, let me show you a couple of samples of answers we received to this question. First, here's how one witness described phone calls from people interested in that witness's testimony. Quote, "What they said to me is as long as I continue to be a team player, they know I'm on the right team. I'm doing the right thing. I'm protecting who I need to protect. You know I'll continue to stay in good graces in Trump world. And they have reminded me a couple of times that Trump does read transcripts. And
He
just
can
keep
read?
that in mind as I proceed through my interviews with the committee." Here's another sample in a different context. This is a call received by one of our witnesses. Quote, "A person let me know you have your deposition tomorrow. He wants me to let you know he's thinking about you. He knows you're loyal.
Oh my
and you're going to do the right thing when you go in for your deposition."
They just read the script from The Godfather?
I think
This
most
textbook
Americans know
Jesus
that attempting to influence witnesses to testify untruthfully presents very serious concerns.
Anybody mention
We
cement
will be
slippers?
discussing these issues as a committee, carefully considering our next
Gabrazzi
steps.
sleeps with the
Mr.
fishes.
Chairman, thank you. I yield back.
Exactly.
Gentlewoman yields back. Ms. Hutchinson, thank you. Thank you for doing your patriotic duty and helping the American people get a complete understanding of January 6th and its causes. Thank you for your courage in testifying here today. You have the gratitude of this committee and your country. I know it wasn't easy to sit here today and answer these questions, but after hearing your testimony in all its candor and detail, I want to speak directly to the handful of witnesses who have been outliers in our investigation, the small number who have defied us outright, those whose memories have failed them again and again on the most important details, and to those who fear Donald Trump and his enablers because of this courageous woman and others like her, your attempt to hide the truth from the American people will fail. And to that group of witnesses, if you've heard this testimony today and suddenly you remember things you couldn't previously recall,
give us a holler.
Or there are some details you'd like to clarify, or you
Pick up a phone.
discovered some courage you had hidden away somewhere, our doors remain open. The Select Committee will reconvene in the weeks ahead as we continue to lay out our findings to the American people. The chair requests those in the hearing room to remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted the witness and members from the room. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
Doors open,
All right.
people, come on down.
All right. Well, I think it's likely that anybody who hasn't cooperated thus far probably won't. But okay, just when you think things can't get worse, they do. I am so angry. I am so sad. Relieved, actually, that this testimony was even more profound than expected. I think this definitely is going to make a huge difference. But as we said at the break, so many people knew what was going on. So many people knew how dangerous it was. And let's be honest, he was like this since day one. It's not like he suddenly became like this after he lost the election. This is just who he is. Okay. And, you know, when you think about his behavior, besides it's being egregious, the only reason he gets away, the only reason he's attacking a Secret Service agent is because he knows that the Secret Service agent can't fight back, right? He's a bully, he's a coward, he's a weakling. For anybody to be afraid of him and to know that, you know, he's got his little Cosa Nostra, very subtly, not so subtly threatening witnesses. We need to see prosecutions, and we need to see them now.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
okay, our work here is done.
I don't know what to add to that. What she said.
Who's going to disagree?
Well, I mean, no.
Now I want him to go free and let him open up a Trump world empire somewhere.
But I think, you know, as a result of today's hearing, it's one of those situations where Jen alluded to it, and I think all of us did, is the Justice Department balls in your court, right? We don't know what they know, but so far, what I was counting was obstruction, seditious conspiracy, assault. Literally, Donald Trump committed assault against a Secret Service, you know, trying to get him to drive to the Capitol instead of back to the West Wing. Fraud. Let's not forget, Norm mentioned that as well, that they defrauded MAGA folks. The MAGA supporters actually have a case against the Trump administration for $250 million because they thought that money was going to election fraud. It was just going to his coffers. And then the fifth one, the one they just said right now, was potential witness tampering. The fact that Trump was behaving like a mob boss. So it's one of the situations that if your audience is for posterity, I think the people who are speaking up are doing their job. If your audience is to convince the people, so far what we've seen is the 5 hearings, this is the 6th hearing, has actually increased the percentage of people who want to hold Trump accountable. It went up 8 percentage points. I think the newest poll after this will go up. And then if your other witness is the Justice Department to put some societal pressure on them, it's a success. I thought today was the most damning hearing possible because you have Cassidy Hutchinson, who was right there, the liaison, right in the Oval Office, who has implicated Mark Meadows by name, Rudy Giuliani, and Donald Trump. They all knew.
She was also very sympathetic, just to say that.
Sympathetic, young, a fantastic witness. You know, speaking as an attorney, it's exactly the type of witness you want. Calm, young, smart, sympathetic, attractive. I hate saying that, but that's how we think as lawyers, right?
It matters, yeah.
Yeah, it matters. And you know, she was thorough. She did her job, and she seemed to have won over enough people. And so, who knew about it? Everyone. When did they know about it? From the start. And now the only question is, who else knew about it? And this is where I think there's a wonderful opening for the rest of the hearings. The last thing I'll say is the pardon list has expanded now, and again, they're doing a really great job with these hearings. Almost like TV shows, right? They want to give you a teaser or a cliffhanger at the end. The blanket pardon list now has expanded to include Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, and there was another teaser there that Jim Jordan knows a lot more than he's letting on.
Yeah, just really quickly, I just want to say, just really quickly before somebody else jumps in, the other thing that made her even more credible and reliable as a witness is the enormous amounts of responsibility she was given by the cowards who had much higher positions in the government than she did. And the only thing that surprised me about today is that Donald lunged at anything other than a hamburger. But
well, maybe he thought it was a hamburger. But you know, Mary, I at the beginning they
don't forget 3
steered
scoops
very well today. They started out talking about how much time Trump spent on wanting to go to the Capitol, and the natural question to follow was why? Because he never went, so he didn't do anything illegal. And then you find out it wasn't he who didn't want to go. It was his staff who, in essence, mutinied against him and got him out of the place. So, you know, Kathy was saying at the beginning she thought he was grifting. I agree. But since he got a ride to the Capitol, instead of having to hoof it up there, which he would never do, I think his craziness overwhelmed him, and he just decided, fuck it, I'm going. And the idea that Michael Flynn, you would ask him the question, do you believe in the peaceful transfer of power? The fifth. What do you mean the fifth? That's the very basis of our government. And the constant denial, you know, I looked at some of the tweets that I had sent out after the election. Myself and every other reporter in that room from the day after the election onward, and I tweeted some of them out, were, you know, like, when are you going to admit you lost? He never would. And his plans the entire time, you see him stonewalling us on the outside, while on the inside, she's giving you the inside scoop of how they were going to try and not only, I mean, the idea that you would drive up to the Capitol and join the insurrectionists. Not only did he plan it, he wanted to ride in like Caesar, a triumphant Caesar. And thank God that the youngest
more like Commodus, I would say.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I thought the most stunning moment in this last segment, and a really important one, was when she said, as a staffer and one who wanted to support the administration and revel in its accomplishments, I felt deeply disappointed. As an American, I was disgusted. And that to me is just so powerful and credible. And I have to say, I'm just glad I'm not Cassidy going back home right now. She has to be scared to death. And that's why they had all this security to begin with. I sure hope they give her continuing security. What a courageous and incredible young person. What a model for the country to be able to stand up and do what she did.
Can I just say one thing very quickly? And I'm sorry, Kathy, I just want to say quickly because this is important. Norm was just finishing up, and of all of us sitting here and people out there, I think important to acknowledge, Norm, that you wrote the book kind of predicting this like 8 years ago. And pointing out, I read that book back then and believed it and watched the mainstream media, even some folks who now seem to get it, not many, but some who, you know, who back then dismissed you. So I just think it's important for anybody watching and people here to know you knew this was coming and you predicted this back then. And so maybe we should listen to you more.
Yeah, well, we should always listen to Norm. Go ahead, Kathy.
I was just going to say, if I may add some perspective about what I'm pretty sure Cassidy is going to go through now, something I have a little experience with. It typically starts with she'll get swarmed from MAGA world. And typically you get a Mike Flynn or a Joe Flynn. You could even get like a Byrne. Who's the guy from Overstock? Robert Byrne? I forgot his name. That guy. And then they'll get their blue checks. And so, you know, so that's how they'll swarm her. And then she'll be doxxed and her address will be out there. They will probably put her into memes right away. They'll probably do a variety of memes, shoot them out around the world, but certainly in MAGA world, on Truth Social, etc. But, you know, they have enough with, you know, the Chans and Reddit, like, people make fun of Truth Social. They don't even need it. They spread their message far and wide. Yep. And she also may go through, you know, what Ruby Freeman did, having folks come to the house, which is their new thing. They will definitely drag her into QAnon. So the Qs will find a whole other reason to convince their following that she's a pedophile. Like they'll go pedophile right away. And
they just went lizard-skinned alien with me.
Yeah, that's right. So they'll say she's a lizard person, and we're all gonna laugh, but those people aren't funny because they're dead serious. They will go to her house, as they just, one of them came to my house about a month ago, after all these years, and then I can just guess, going home, the family will not necessarily be with her in this environment. I mean, I feel for her. She will be shocked to learn how many folks can't even say, I respect what you did or something. People will go out of their way to reach out to her, people she hasn't heard from in years. They will stop her on the street and tell her what they think. Sometimes when they do that, they'll do it in a way where they'll try to get a couple of other people. Like that happened to me one time walking down the street where the guy was so loud, he was hoping to pick up like a MAGA here and there. But the scary thing is, this group is so well coordinated, and we can laugh at them like the gang that doesn't shoot straight. But one thing they really know how to do is this kind of intimidation. Yeah. And so I definitely feel for what she is started to go through, and definitely it's coming. And the MAGAs, they do not forget. Their memory is long. So this will unfortunately chase her for who knows? Who knows? It's like it will chase her until what? Her own party is sort of normal. So I definitely feel for her, and being so young, the idea that these guys are turning to a then 24-year-old woman, Kevin McCarthy screaming at her, and all these people blaming her.
But she stood up, baby.
Yeah, but imagine laying that on, like an assistant, and she's so smart. I hate that she's on their side, but she's so smart. But it's going to be very rough for her.
Yeah. It is, and Adam, part of. I keep coming back to this, that anybody was surprised is just utter nonsense. So we can't give any of these people plausible deniability.
Did you say Adam, Mary?
Yeah, I did indeed.
Thanks.
By the way, also, hi Dahlia. You're welcome.
Hey Dahlia. I think that there is probably a new wall. What was I gonna say? There's definitely a new coat of Heinz on the wall at Mar-a-Lago today. To begin with, but to talk about her, I think she didn't just expose Trump and Meadows today. She exposed an entire party of weaklings, cowards, and traitors. I thought, as someone who has worked for Hillary Clinton for 15 years, one of the most interesting things was basically every single fake attack, many of the things that Kathy described that they did to Hillary over the last 30 years. Ended up being the perfect description of Donald Trump and exactly who he is. A lot of these things that we've seen out there, the memes of him in the trucks and the cars and the high chair, they all actually are true after listening to it. But no, I think she exceeded expectations. She's an incredible human being. It's sort of like the poll workers that we saw in Georgia. They didn't, they had to live through hell just to go there and do this. She's about to experience what they have been going through before they had to go through it again. I feel awful for her, but she's the true patriot and American today.
That's right. Jen?
I'm just in a state of shock. I just cannot believe that she was holding on to this information for so long. I mean, you know me, I would be like telling everybody, and I don't have that kind of self-control. I don't know how, she was carrying this with her. And I wonder if it was her family or what it took for her to come to this moment. And I keep going back to this conversation we had during the other break, which is why in the world did her lawyers feel the need for her to go to this committee, and bless them for doing this, to this committee instead of to the Justice Department first? Because there's three choices. One, she didn't go to them first. Two, she did, and they've not done anything, and they didn't stop her from testifying, right?
She had a different lawyer. She had a Trumpy lawyer before this, who I am sure tried to keep her from going in this direction.
She
fired
fired.
a
Yep.
lawyer, brought on a new lawyer, and that's what.
Right. No, but Norm, she spoke to the committee last week. The question is, why didn't she go right to the Justice Department? And my fear is that her lawyers thought they suck.
Do we know that she didn't?
We don't.
We don't. But if she went to them and they haven't actually done anything about this, it's shocking to me.
Well,
I mean,
that would also depend on
gun after smoking gun. We have the president assaulting a Secret Service agent.
all of those are valid points.
I mean,
Well, they did get
Giuliani-
Andrew
wait a
Gillum,
second,
so
let me
that's
finish.
important.
Giuliani got patted on the fucking back at a store. That guy got cuffed. You're telling me you can like assault a Secret Service agent and still walk on this rock around?
I'm the effing president. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the whole point. I think the whole point of this, when you come down to it, is one man above the law. Donald Trump certainly thought he was and acted that way every chance he got, and none of it surprises me. Mary, you knew about it. How people warned us about it for years. The man's a nut.
I think the other scary thing is
around that.
the other scary thing is, and Karam, I don't put you in this bucket, but if you look at how many reporters got it wrong after January 6th,
don't get me started.
It's
Adam,
terrifying.
You being in that White House press corps during the Trump administration, I often felt like I was in a classroom filled with children. There were maybe 5 or 6 people that got it, and the rest of them were wandering around so happy that they got access to the president. They were shitting themselves for the meal that they would get on Air Force One, never realizing that they didn't get what they were there to do, and that was their job. And the simple fact of the matter is, if we had done our job better under the Trump administration, there were so many places that everything fell down and gave Trump his inroad. The government fell down. The Justice Department fell down. Reporters fell down. This was a complete collapse of everything in our society, and we should own what we did wrong because the press fucked it up from day one. So
the press has fucked it up for
that or anything, but
years. Well, it's got to suck to watch your entire most of your professional colleagues just failing miserably.
Well,
Dahlia,
I feel her pain.
Yes,
but the good news is they all got rich off of him.
That is true. That is
Those
really all that
reporters.
matters. But Dahlia, there is, I want to keep staying with this. That a couple of hearings ago, I'm so coherent. By the way, Ghislaine Maxwell got 20 years. But anyway, Dahlia, we were deeply concerned a couple of hearings ago that this was going to turn into, it's just Donald and maybe 1 or 2 other guys. Did today feel like a turning point in that or not?
A couple things. Sorry, I'm late.
There's no late here.
That was something. So just one sort of table setting observation. And Mary, I think this goes to the heart of stuff you've been writing for a long time, but it's really easy to let the food throwing and the Secret Service strangling dip you into that narrative about, this is the Peter Sellers presidency. A little bit of what Kathy was saying about the MAGA people, right? That there's a sort of a Three Stooges clown show element to this. And it's always tempting to say that's the headline, but what that headline does is diffuse like actual criminality. Yep. And I think one of the things that was super helpful today was that the Peter Sellers stuff, while entertaining, is totally unsurprising. He throws food. He tries to choke people. Totally unsurprising. And the actual criminal conduct, inciting a mob, taking down the metal, or it's asking to take down the metal detectors because they're not coming after you, failing to act when Mike Pence is quite literally in peril of his life, tampering with witnesses at the very end. He reads the transcripts. Dun, dun, dun. Like, that's just really, really cut and dried. We don't have to talk about Peter Sellers movies anymore. This is just, and I think, it somewhat goes to Jen's point about, we are talking now about nothing wacky. We are talking about existential threats to democracy and people's lives. And I'm just really hoping, I'm hoping that we don't like do the Peter Sellers version of this and get really myopic about how funny it is that he threw his food. So that's the just the initial thing. And then I just think on the other point, yes, many more people are on the hook. Meadows and Giuliani asked for pardons. But I also think it's really interesting that she had those three categories of the sort of the neutrals, the deflectors, and then the, people who were trying their level best. This is Pat Cipollone. This is Ivanka, people who are trying their Hirschman, their level best to get this to stop. And I really think as we go forward, thinking about who moves from what category and why is really, really interesting.
Well, while you were just talking, one of the injured Capitol police officers just came out to the microphone, and his quote was, "Our own president set us up."
Succinct and to the point, and also true.
Canel.
Was it? Yeah,
that's
I would figure he'd be the one to do it. Yeah.
So I just want to push back about one thing. I don't think any of it's funny. And I think it's the food throwing, the choking of a Secret Service officer trying to take over the steering wheel, all of that. Yes, it's not as important, but it's damning to the people who, it's illustrative, yes, but it's also damning to the people who sat by and let it happen. Because again, if you think, not you, but you editorially think that this is the first time Donald threw stuff and attacked people, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. I mean, this is who he fucking is. So, I agree with you absolutely that it can't overshadow everything else. But I think if it's handled properly, it is of a piece. It fits in with the entire picture of what was going on that day. Go ahead, Kathy.
I was going to say also, MAGA loves that stuff. So trust me, that's probably all over MAGA online of like, they'll do the animated thing where he's got like the Rambo body, they'll be throwing ketchup, and then they'll throw in like all that other stuff. So and as much as someday we'll look at that stuff and laugh, that is no joke to them. It's a point of pride. Trust me, they're going to have t-shirts made up where, like, my guy isn't afraid to choke you. It's like, remember the Gianforti thing when, Gianforti like punched knocked off the journalist glasses, etc. So look for all those things. They are very good at taking this stuff that we think is appalling that anyone would do, much less a president. And then they'll turn it into merch and they'll make it like they love to gather around this stuff.
When I was in DC this morning, I hadn't seen this in a while. All the carts are back. The only flags they're selling are "Let's Go Brandon" on the corner of the White House again.
Oh, there's still some Trump. When you're at 17th and Penn, that little shop there, they'll sell you Trump memorabilia still. But look, that's not a political statement. Those guys will sell you anything that that's just trying to make money.
Waj, you had a comment.
Yeah, 2 points for any Peter Sellers reference, but this is probably the end of Dr. Strangelove, which ends in nuclear apocalypse, for those of you who are old enough to get the reference. But I think, what I'm really worried about, and Delia mentioned the three categories that Cassidy articulated. The majority of the GOP now is in the deflection mode. And I think what's really important and what was really sobering of the many sobering things is Mike Flynn, who was our director of intelligence and Trump's former national security advisor, pled the fifth when it came to the peaceful transfer of power, the use of violence, right?
Yes.
And the base is with Flynn. And I just want to remind people that the majority of Republicans who barely survived a violent insurrection, and an hour later they went, and most of them, people forget this, the majority of them said, we're going to decertify the election. And the RNC, not just Marjorie Taylor Greene, the RNC said, they're ordinary citizens engaged in a legitimate protest. And the day that the RNC came out with that statement, they censured Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. And I think as of the last count, there's 108 Republicans who've won their primaries since May who adopt the big lie, and the majority of the base believes in the big lie, and they're doing the ongoing through the state legislature. So for me, the reason why you need the Justice Department to crack down figuratively, and you need accountability, and I want hearings for the rest of the summer, because I thought that was thrilling entertainment. Were you not entertained, America? Were you not entertained? is that it not only do you need to see people in handcuffs, not only do you need to see people held accountable, you also need to see the consistent narrative that the GOP has become the party of deflection and the party of the big lie, and that's why they have to lose going up to the election, because if they win, as we've discussed before on your podcast many times, Mary, it looks like it's not just a wrap. It looks like, I mean, we've always talked about it's going to be a wrap for democracy, but we're talking about literal violence when their MAGA avatar, their mob boss, friggin' took a went to choke out his own Secret Service guy, and like Kathy said, they celebrate Rambo Trump. What's going to happen to America?
Your point, one of, if not the main consultants working in the primary against Liz Cheney is the former campaign manager who had submitted testimony.
To you, well, and watch also to your point about violence. There is already concern among members of law enforcement locally, federally, and at the state level that the MAGA violence is going to be the next face that you see on mass shootings. And
I had never even heard the AR-15 line until today. I don't know if others had. I mean, I've listened to 40 hours of tape.
What was most frustrating about that, and Adam, you pointed out, there were reporters there, and we're running into people and we're telling them, these people are armed. These people are armed. And then there was the other people that came through. The chant to kill or hang Mike Pence started out as F Mike Pence, F Mike Pence. And then you saw the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers start walking through the crowd, changing the chant and drumming up support for hang Mike Pence. And that's when they brought out the scaffold and put it up. It was a very well choreographed effort. We saw it. We tried to tell people. We tried to report on it. Some people got beat for it. I'll give the press a B on the people who were on the ground that day that spent a lot of time on the ground. They did an excellent job. I think what we didn't do that day was disseminate from our anchors and others and let people know exactly. There was a communication disconnect that we were saying it was very dangerous. And I don't think that resonated sitting in New York or LA or Chicago, wherever the anchors were.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
Someone may have already mentioned this, but Mary, if I can say one thing, there was a moment where she talked about the deputy chief of staff, and she didn't know if the message had been delivered about what they knew was coming on January 6th. And this is the one that was in charge of the operations and the conduit to Secret Service and Capitol Police. And one wonders, is it because of him that there was so little security planned around the Capitol?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely probably the case, and I hope that I hope they uncover that in the hearings. And Jen, I want to go to you, but first I just want to say Jeff Tiedrich just posted this tweet. What did the president throw, and when did he throw it? Oh, thank you, Simon. Which I mean, time? The new exactly. So, I think what I hope happens, Jen, is that the Democrats take a page out of that book. Now we can say that the maggots who put Donald's head on Rambo's body are insane and deluded, and they are, but they like the throwing of the ketchup. They like the choking out of the Secret Service agent. Why? Because their guy is fighting for them. So Democrats, please fight for us, but in a way that isn't illegal or anti-American. But so Jen, I'm hoping that there is a hearing entirely dedicated to what Republicans were saying that day and the devolution of their take on this, because that's how we help people make it clear that this was not just people in the executive branch.
Yeah, I mean, a few people brought this up. I think Dahlia was the first to raise the 3 buckets, not baskets of deplorables, but 3 buckets, 3 camps of reactors. And, now that the entire Republican Party, except, maybe the Cheney's camp, now that
the 2 of them.
Whoever thought that would be the one good.
Now that the party is really hanging on to, and Donald is still hanging on to the deflect and blame, I want a hearing on deflect and blame. because that's part of the, and how tied is that to the
Knock and all.
aiding and abetting? And someone asked on Twitter, is this leading to RICO charges? And not to get into like what the RICO statute is, but this is still an ongoing RICO conspiracy.
Can you just tell people what RICO means? Because a lot of people probably don't know.
Racketeering Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act.
Yep.
It's like Title 18 USC 1961 at SEC.
Modeled after the Trump organization?
We don't need to go that far into the weeds. But
yeah, the idea is, the thing about RICO is it can federalize even state law offenses. So you can take certain state law, violent, specifically enumerated state law offenses, as well as a long list of federal offenses are considered racketeering activity. And if there's a pattern of what's called a pattern of racketeering activity, then that can lead to not just criminal, but civil charges to take money away from some of these organizations. So like, to the extent that all this kind of is part of a piece, like the fundraising, and I don't need to go on. We don't even need RICO charges. But I mean, to me, this was like the issue. Like, this is like, if you added this to the final exam, the issue spotter would be too easy. Like, she brought it all together.
Yeah, it's all the exceptions to hearsay. I feel like it's a crim law or an evidence. Literally, it took me back to law school. It's like the bar exam, and there's an evidence essay. Like, what are all the exceptions to hearsay? And she had it: admission, state of mind, right? Declaration of intent. This is all like, she could get him dead to rights.
So to you lawyer types, if I can ask just very quickly, that crazy old bastard Mo Brooks seems pretty pissed off recently. Because Trump cost him, obviously, his career by turning on him. In the last interview that I saw with him, he was saying how Trump isn't loyal to anybody, which I thought was hilarious. He just discovered that. I know. Wow. Did you know that? I couldn't have figured that out. And he's not loyal to anybody. He's all about ego and all. So I'm wondering, do you think if he were willing to do it and they got him there, can he add more, or is it just not necessary at this point? Do we have what we need?
I mean, more is always better, but if they can keep this witness alive and cooperating,
alive?
Right.
I mean, I'm serious. Like, she's got to keep her safe,
Yeah.
Well,
who ever thought we'd even say that when we're talking about the president?
I know, but now we're sitting here wondering if the sergeant at arms, like, killed himself or died of natural causes today. Like, I'm not ruling out even that.
We should all be asking where Mitch McConnell is and demanding her lifetime security on the floor right now.
That's right. And I mean, if she has a lawyer worth his or her salt, then clearly this would have been part of the. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just wasn't. I thought I was muted. But if she has a lawyer worth his or her salt, then that was part of the deal. I certainly hope so. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, so in the text from Laura Ingraham, the thing about, this is looking as bad as the BLM, Antifa, whatever. Do we have anybody on record yet saying that they absolutely know that it's BS every time they go out there and tell their people it's BLM and Antifa?
Yeah.
Who's going on the record? Because I certainly, many of the J6ers are like, hey, we don't want somebody else taking credit for our awesome work. But has any of them said, like, here's a text from somebody saying, we know it's not BLM.
That was in an early hearing. I don't remember. It might have been Mark Meadows, but that was floated as an idea. Let's blame Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Let's pin it on them. Let's say it's them.
Does
anybody remember who it was?
Tie that to Trump directly? Like, is there anything about him sort of asserting that publicly or to his fan base?
Well, I do know that after the downtown where I was, when they came out and gassed the people, and they tried to say that it was Antifa that did it. And there were many of us who witnessed it firsthand who testified that it was not, whether it was testimony in court or whether it was in our columns, our news reports, or on television. What was not known at the beginning was whether or not there was what the gas was that was used. So we said appeared to be tear gas, could have been pepper gas. I smelled it. I knew what it was, but and so did many others. But until it was confirmed, we didn't go with that. But the fact was, from the very beginning, there didn't need to be people step forward and say that Antifa wasn't involved, because it was already reported by most people in the media who were doing their job that in fact was bullshit. And so that I think that was settled shortly, except you're right. Kathy, except for the
MAGA
MAGA.
to this day.
day.
They
But
love
they
to say they were, Antifa and Trump outfits. I mean, they really, really believe that stuff.
Yes,
but Dahlia, hold on.
I don't buy any of that.
Dahlia, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's why today is so damning. When you have the president himself acknowledging they're my people. I know they're my people. It just
they're not going to hurt me.
Puts the lie to the idea that it was anyone else. Now you have from the very top, from somebody who's in the room. I just think like that narrative is over functionally.
Yeah.
Dahlia, do you think, I know I already said that I doubt anybody's going to change his or her mind about testifying, but do you think that there's a possibility that this will bring some pressure to bear on somebody like a Pat Cipollone, who, from what I can tell, was on the right side of this, at least, professionally, during the unfolding of events?
I was trying to reverse engineer the 3 buckets, to figure out how it incentivizes further testimony.
We're all obsessed with the buckets.
I'm obsessed with the buckets. Yeah. Like that's the architecture of,
and the stuff to date, right? Where Benny Thompson said the door's open.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I feel like they're putting the screws slowly. Like they're saying, some of you have lied to us. Some of you have told us things that are not true. You have Mike Flynn just taking the 5th over a moral question. So I guess I just think
you have no morals.
Well, it's unbelievable. You can't answer a moral question. But I guess my sense of it is that as like Ivanka really wants to be in the bucket with Hirschman and Cipollone, I think. Like that's really good for her. So then the question is, does she now cooperate because she's been named as somebody who was trying to pump the brakes? And at the same time, the people like Meadows, who are like, she's put them in 2 buckets, right? Meadows was both deflect and deny and trying to inch his way over to neutral as he lay in despair on his couch, doom scrolling. And I think it's really what that incentivizes for him.
Sorry. We need to stop there and just appreciate that, because the whole time I'm thinking, did Mark Meadows do anything other than sit on his couch and look at his phone? But that's perfect.
You know what? I want to know what he was scrolling through. Was it?
He's like the Kardashians. He's looking at his own press.
Pornhub.
He was like this the whole time. He's like,
I think there was another news alert while we were all talking, which is that the filmmaker Alex Holder has been contacted by the Fulton County DA now.
Oh,
yeah. I just saw that one too. Excellent. Yep.
And she's on it, by the way, guys. The Fulton County DA is on it, and she's not going to rest. And that opens up Trump to state crimes.
They're
for pressuring Brad Raffensperger.
They are going to corner Donald Trump. It's going to be like watching a New York sewer rat cornered in, with rabies in the back of an alley somewhere. I can't wait to see it. But you mentioned that was funny. It was like, the door's open, people. Look, if you got something, come on down. Newfound conscious, left something out, want a discount on a new washer, come on down. I mean, their doors are wide open. And I think they're going to get some. I think he said that today kind of with a hint of a snark, knowing that there are other people that are coming down. And that was a shot across the Donald's bow, I think, more than anything else.
And Mary, one thing for the attorneys is, I was talking to Daniel Uhlfelder in Florida earlier, who's running in the Democratic primary for Attorney General. And this may have been said, but curious, a lot of this stuff, the planning took place. There were meetings. They were in Mar-a-Lago. So to what extent, with the planning and what was going on the ground in Florida from a state standpoint, just makes you kind of curious from someone who doesn't know anything about the legal stuff. Does that have any ramifications?
Jen or Dahlia?
Are you trying to ask whether there's
if they were making plans for January 6th while they were at Mar-a-Lago in the days prior?
Who's the DA of Palm Beach County? I mean, is it someone who likes Donald? I mean,
I'm not
sure. Is it still Biondi?
There's a lot of unsafe bed bugs in Mar-a-Lago right now that if there's a raid coming, they better find a new
yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, there are a lot of jurisdictions.
Kind of bugs.
There are a lot of jurisdictions.
Could be a good reason to elect a Florida AG that's a Dem this year.
Oh,
you think? Well,
Yeah.
there are
Yeah,
a
bad
million
idea.
reasons to be doing that everywhere.
I mean, to me, I agree with. I mean, I think I was expecting some kind of indictment in July out of Georgia, but maybe I'm wrong. And I, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on with the Justice Department. I didn't think they would. They won't be. I didn't think they would be doing anything at the higher levels until the spring. But again, I'm shocked and troubled that when her new, I'm not. I mean, I want to know why her lawyers went to this committee, and it's just great that they did. Maybe
I know there's
I got a
people working
question
at
for
every
you.
level, but as a Ukrainian, I was actually disappointed to see Merrick Garland taking a trip to Ukraine.
Yeah.
I would have much rather had him here working. You know, that stuff can wait.
Yeah, like what
It
is
was so bad? A lot of
I don't-
people.
unless he's over there
But
digging
Jen-
up some of the Ukrainian conspiracy.
Yeah, Giuliani.
Yeah, I'm sure
real
he's all
quick
over the
question,
Hunter
if
Biden thing.
anybody knows, real quick, is Mike Flynn still getting a government pension?
Yep, I believe so. He has not
Yeah,
been.
that's unbelievable
decommissioned.
to me.
He hasn't been
If you
decommissioned.
cannot
Donald, all of his
defend
children, they're
peaceful-
getting Secret Service.
Yeah, I know. Think
Millions
about
of
that.
dollars taxpayer money.
While we're
You
still
will
waiting
not
for
endorse a peaceful transfer of
Call
power
him back
until
into
your government
service
still pays
and-
you.
while we're still waiting for Alex Vindman to get what he deserves.
That's
Yeah.
right. I just want to read this very quickly. Mick Mulvaney, who shouldn't have a job anywhere, certainly not at a quote unquote news organization,
Making license
said,
plates, maybe.
Madman.
well, that would be nice too.
Madman.
Said this: Cheney's closing is stunning. They think they have evidence of witness tampering and obstruction of justice. There's an old maxim: it's never the crime. By the way, it's totally the fucking crime this time.
Yeah.
It's always the cover up, and it's that too. Things went very badly for the former, for Donald today. My guess is that it will get worse from here. Only Donald.
No. But here's the problem. Remember, there's still that Office of Legal Counsel memo. And there's still Bill Barr's position that was really redacted that a president can never be charged with obstruction. And this is why fucking Garland should have dealt with the obstruction charges from Mueller. But anyhow, I'm just going to get enraged all over again. So I'm
Well,
going to shut
Jen,
up.
is he using? Someone told me that they think that he's using bad. Like Rudy Giuliani is a lawyer, and simply and all of them.
How
gave
does
him
he still have a law license? Like what? Like,
Good
seriously,
question.
no
But
consequences.
is he using? If he uses them as a shield, and they've left their butts hanging out in the breeze doing something illegal, that's not really a shield for Donald anymore, is it? I mean, they can then go after him for that.
If you're talking about privilege issues, that's one thing. But
Right.
the separate question is, what is the Department of Justice's position under Article 2 about a president obstructing?
Yeah.
And that's hanging out there, and it was never fully dealt with because there's this legacy memo from Barr. And when I used to criticize Garland, I sort of dropped that, hoping he would do better. I was encouraged by some stuff he was doing, but he never dealt with the obstruction in the Mueller report. And there was a fucking roadmap to that.
There you go.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want Merrick Garland to be the new Robert Mueller, just the wrong man at the wrong time. And honestly, I don't see how. I basically refusing to investigate and indict would be along with everything the Supreme Court is doing, it would be the last nail in the coffin of American democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's overstating it, right, Wash?
I mean, if you have the GOP win the House and the Senate in 2024 and let's not forget the Supreme Court where
2022,
we have 2023. And if you have the Supreme Court, which we have seen aggressively this week is committed to, in my opinion, a white Christian nationalist agenda where we have right-wing activists wearing black robes. Forgive me for being so blunt. Not only do we see the
straight line.
Not only do we see the end or a direct threat to American democracy, we see the erosion of the rights that were so hard fought for the past 70 years. I've said that we're going to go back to 1953, which is a year before Brown versus Board of Education, which kicked off the quote-unquote culture war, which ended segregation. Some people said I'm an optimist, and then they're going to try to take it back to 1853. But either way, if you control the courts, you control the House, you control the Senate, you have a president, and what we've seen from these hearings, it was, if not just for a handful of Republicans who acted as the guardrails, you'll have a Mike Flynn. and Stephen Miller as your next attorney general, right? Just think about it. You might laugh at me, but suppose that some of these people who said this was bullshit say, no, I'm a true believer, I don't give a shit. And then suppose then you purge the Justice Department and the State Department and all the bureaucracies and put in loyalists, then you have what we have in Hungary, which is a one-party backsliding democracy, which basically is a stand-in for autocracy. And then what happens when the majority is represented by the minority that has all the power?
Right. And I want to push back at you as well. None of this is funny. And all of what you said will come to pass. So, none of this should be taken lightly. None of it is beyond, it's beyond comprehension that it wouldn't happen if the Republicans can continue to rig the system in their favor. So Dahlia, Donald apparently just truthed, whatever that means, about Cassidy Hutchinson. I hardly know her. Does it matter that he knows her? No, I don't think it does.
It doesn't. That's why all the GOP tweets about how this is hearsay doesn't matter. She was in the room.
Also, it means he knows her really well.
Yes, but also
it's not a criminal trial.
She was in the room, and she's testifying to things that she saw and heard and participated in. And so none of this matters. And the fact that neither whoever tweets for the GOP nor the former president knows that is kind of immaterial. The one sort of depressing gloss I have on what the two of you just said is I'm not worried about him putting in place people who are crackpottier. I'm worried about him putting in place the next go around people who are less crackpot, who are very, very effective and who are white shoe lawyers from fancy law firms and who aren't Sidney Powell and who aren't Rudy Giuliani. Because I think when you get the drunks out and you put in, the like high functioning people who also have no scruples, I think that's how you kind of go.
You mean like Bill Barr?
Well, Mary, if I may, real quick, I'm less worried about Trump, and I've said this before. I'm more worried about DeSantis.
That's what I was just going to say, because Donald can't help himself. He'll always surround himself with people who are weaker and less competent, like Rudy, et cetera. So, I'm with you 100%. That's the danger here.
I think the danger is this Supreme Court. I think that's where the real danger is. That, I mean, look, what you saw today, and the testimony you saw today, that directly reflects on how we got to where we are in the Supreme Court and how we end up with no Roe v. Wade. There's just no Donald Trump's damage. You can see it in everything the man does and how he runs things. And because we didn't step up sooner, we're looking at, just imagine, think of it this way. Women got the vote in 2021, and then 50 years later, they got Roe v. Wade. So what if 50 years after you got the vote, instead of getting Roe v. Wade, you lost the vote? That's what you're looking at essentially today with the loss of Roe v. Wade. You have a Supreme. What this portends and what it shows is none of these people believe in precedents.
They don't believe in anything except they're. Just hang on 1 second, guys. Hang on, because Dahlia has to leave. I just wonder if you have any last thoughts. Dahlia.
No, I was just, first of all, thank you so much. It's always like magic to be with you guys. But I just want to also point out that the Supreme Court that now has absolutely no brakes and no incentive to break. And for people like me who thought they'd go slow, has been put to the lie. They are out of control, and they're going to take this independent state legislature doctrine case, and I keep saying this, they are paving the road for 2024 and helping throw the election. And so I think, when we say the court is a part of this, it's not just that there's an adjacent Supreme Court that's being lawless. It's going to contribute to this happening the next time.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Dahlia.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. So,
take care, Dahlia.
Brian, sorry to interrupt, but I know Dahlia had to go. Right. But so let's stick with that.
I was on a rant anyway, hey.
Well, it happens from time to time, I've noticed. Thank you. Waj, any quick last thoughts?
No, thank you so much. I call this the Nerd Avengers, and I appreciate it. And I also follow the comments. So thank you for all those who watch and listen. And it gives me comfort that people actually care and are fighting for our democracy. And I feel like this crew in particular doesn't hold back, doesn't mince words, is willing to take the bully and punch it in the face.
Yeah, so, fuck those guys.
Yeah,
that's right.
Thank you all. And thank you for always inviting me.
Always. Thank you, Ash. Okay, so the Supreme Court. All of this is of a piece. I think, Donald is a symptom of a disease that's 50 years, that's been, eating away at us for 50 years. The Supreme Court is a symptom of the same disease, this current Supreme Court. And we can't, we can't look at them as separate things. And at the root of all of it is the entirety of the Republican Party.
Well, can I say something quickly? We got arrogant. It's funny that, Brian, you brought up the 1970s, and you've got Roe versus Wade, and you've got these other obviously positive decisions. It's that before that Miranda, which they've also just harmed, obviously. And if you look in the 70s, you'll find like
Times versus Sullivan is next.
You'll find ALEC, founded in 73. You'll find the Federalist Society founded, I want to say, late 70s, early 80s. You'll find I sit here in Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Revolt with the NRA, with the nuts taking over in 1977, Moral Majority 78. Sorry, I had to write stuff about all this crap. Don't mean to bore you to death. Heritage Foundation 73. They sat there and they created infrastructure, legal, media, and otherwise to take us to where we are today. And we all on the left, not that most of us, I wasn't alive yet for most of the time I'm talking about, but I was early in the 70s, late 70s. But point being, like they did all of this, and we just figured everything would be okay. Liberals had won, and we sat there and we watched. And so when you point that out, Mary, it's important that people know that, like, this has been long term. Donald was a symptom of that. Mitch using 90% of the filibusters that have been used in the history of the Republic is a symptom of that. Newt Gingrich in 94. They've been building towards all this shit, and we've let them.
We have. And I think that's because I think in some ways it's characterological, and in some ways it's just a failure to I don't like quoting Condoleezza Rice, but it's a failure of imagination. Like, seriously, like, who could believe that we are literally living in a Christian nationalist country that in which women are second-class citizens by law? I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing. I just want to say really quickly that my producer posted a screenshot of all of us with the caption, "We will adopt your baby," which I thought was hysterical. We're going to wrap up because I've taken so much of your time. And I appreciate all of you so much. I've said it many times.
We love you too.
I love you back. I could not do this alone. Watching these hearings is absolutely draining. Even when it's good stuff, it's draining. It's infuriating. It makes me sad for this country. It makes me sad about human nature in some ways. But you guys counter that because you're all fighting the good fight, and I appreciate it more than I can say. So let's just go around. Adam, any last thoughts?
I'll go off topic and just in terms of the Supreme Court and what's going on throughout the country, I will say that some mass shooters don't carry guns and wear robes.
Couldn't agree more. Cliff?
Wow. I can't come up with anything nearly that profound. I'll just say, don't everybody keep talking about this. Don't be bullied. People who are watching this, keep speaking up about January 6th. Keep speaking up about this Supreme Court and what it's doing, and don't stop fighting.
Absolutely. Brian?
I'll just go back to this one quote, and it's a paraphrase, but it is a quote about today's witness. She said, "I remember feeling frustrated, and it was personal. I was sad, and as an American, I was disgusted. The Capitol building was debased because of a lie." I don't know how you get away from those very basic facts. And what today showed was that it was the youngest among us, the least senior, the one who witnessed it, who ultimately, although I would love to have seen them all step forward much earlier when she was called. And maybe she didn't step forward because in the beginning she wasn't called, but they called her and she stepped up, and you got to give her, this today will be remembered for many, many, many years. It's a very historical day of testimony. And I don't think that we're in the moment right now. I hope we appreciate the moment and realize what this moment means, because that was huge.
Yeah, she's in the history books for sure, and it is
She's
really
going to run for president at some point. Bet.
Well, I mean, we'll see.
I hope.
But it really, really is that simple. It was based on a lie. I'm an American and I'm disgusted with everybody I work for, which is the people at the highest level of government. Jen, final thoughts for today.
Yeah, I mean, as we enter an even darker chapter in the nation's history, I think it's really important to remember that it has been over this hard period, and even forever, probably, our friendships that will sustain us and our families. And I know that Michael is watching.
Hi, Michael.
And, I think about him as an artist. I think about the things, taking time. For a lot of us, this is kind of our passion, policy, politics. But what people don't realize is all of us, I think, do other things, whether it's we have dogs or cats, or we have an exercise thing, or we birds or whatever. And I want people to know, who are watching this, and to remember, take breaks, spend time on that. This isn't getting fixed this week, next week, this year. This is years and decades ahead. And local politics, local involvement are going to be critical. That's my message.
Absolutely. And just to cap that off, we need to keep fighting because we stopped fighting. And democracy is not an end point. It is a process, and it constantly needs to be nurtured and fought for. Thank you all so much. Jen Tubb, Brian Karam, Adam Parkomenko, Ali Samarco, Cliff Schechter, Norm Ornstein, Kathy Griffin, Dahlia Lithwick, Wajahat Ali, and other people I'm sure I'm forgetting, but I appreciate your being here so much. And we will see you at the next hearings. She kept saying that. So future hearings. So that also gives me hope. Thank you, guys.
And all these comments are amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for all those comments.
Thanks so much, guys.
All right. We will see you soon. In the meantime, stay safe, my friends.
Thanks for all you do, Mary.
Oh boy. That was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen in my life. I am really kind of, I don't even know how to put it. I'm beyond grateful that to have had such an amazing panel, but also to have all of you. We've gotten thousands and thousands of comments. Thank you for being here. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for your generosity and for being in the fight with us. As I mentioned at the beginning, but it will repeat in case you weren't here, there will not be a strategy session tonight. This went on for a long time, so you guys are probably sick of me. Anyway, but we will resume the strategy sessions next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific at Politicon. What is it? Sorry, it's youtube.com/Politicon. My brain's a little fried. And of course, this Thursday, we'll have a regular show, also 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. That's youtube.politicon.com. And we will keep bringing you these hearings as long as they have them. So stay tuned. And don't forget, when you're on the Politicon YouTube page, click the bell, because that way, it just disappeared. Yeah, there it is. You will get everything. As I mentioned, I've been dropping shorter videos, just commentating on the insanity of what's going on. With the hearings happening last minute, you will be notified of all of that, plus our regular shows. And of course, you can listen to the shows in podcast form on Apple or anywhere else you get your podcasts. Please give us a 5-star review. It really does help other people find the show. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you Thursday. In the meantime, please stay safe and be kind.